pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We had an executive session before this meeting. We discussed personnel issues, and we also talked about litigation. Minutes of the October 11th meeting.
Will they be approved?
Second, but I have a couple of changes. On page 4, bottom section says the section's entitled Decision on the Bond Deferring Structure. On the second line, I think where it uses the abbreviation for department DEPT, I think that word is supposed to be debt, to decrease the annual debt service payments. So I think if that typo could be corrected. And then I think I'm pretty sure I was clear at the meeting, but if I wasn't, I apologize for that, but I think I was pretty clear, and I think it just got misinterpreted. What I specifically asked for on page 7 under old business was a comparison of the actuals to the report we got from the consulting firm a few years ago to see how accurate their projection was. And I don't think that what's stated here is an accurate reflection of that. So if it could be corrected to, what I'd like is an actual compared to the report from that consulting firm. And I don't remember the name, Tammy. I don't know if you remember the name by chance. It was a few years ago that the consulting firm that did the market research study for us on the Radnor Activity Center.
Will they be approved of those two changes?
I have a change.
Actually, I
also.
have a comment. I'm sorry about this, but there are a couple votes missing from here. During that bond decision discussion, we took 2 votes. We took a vote on the how to redo the funding that we were getting back from this refinancing. There was 3 options, and we took a vote to go with option number 3, which is not reflected here. The vote that is reflected here was for the parameters ordinance. So we actually took 2 separate votes. The first vote was moved by Hank and seconded by John Fisher. I actually I went and looked up because I couldn't remember what happened. And so we should have these minutes just at least reflect the vote that was taken. And in the prior section, there were actually 2 votes taken as well. The first one is not reflected. Here what's reflected is a vote on the work of the Shade Tree Commission. Then, before the last 2 sentences, there was a separate motion brought up, a motion to authorize proceeding with a filing of a PICO grant, and we took a separate vote for that, which is not reflected here. So I think we might need to, I hate to say this, I know it's a big pain for staff, but we might need to do these again and put those 2 votes back in.
On the first page, under meeting minutes, it says Commissioner Curley moved to approve the minutes. Since we haven't been consistent with approving minutes for the previous meeting, we need to put a date in there for which minutes he voted to approve.
And also on page 2, under Willow's Cottage Harvest Festival, says the vote passed 5-1 with Commissioner Higgins opposed, but that was 4-2. I was opposed to that also. I'm assuming you were opposed too, Kevin, but I know I was.
Yep.
So that correction needs to be made. And then I'm going to motion then that we table these to make the changes that we identified here, and we see them at the next meeting.
We have a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Well, let's see them before the next meeting and make any changes before we get to a meeting.
We can't make changes before we get to a meeting because the
No.
document...
No, we can see the changes.
Yeah,
You
but the
can-
document is issued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once we get it on Friday, we can't make changes then.
Right.
The only mechanism isn't this
No,
meeting.
but we can get it long before Friday and with the changes made, so you have any other changes, you can let know what they are.
Motion to table, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? minutes for December 6th. Don, why don't you lead this since I wasn't present?
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any commissioner comment?
Well, first, I wasn't present. Right?
Yes.
Oh, wait, this is December 6th. I am, I'm sorry. I was here for this one.
Very good.
See what travel does? Is the 29th is the one I wasn't here for. Yeah, wow.
All right, so no further commissioner comment. Is there any public comment? Very well. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Open up for public participation for
Good evening. My name is Dave Roderick, West Wayne, president of the Radnor Fire Company, and I just am here to let you know that members of the fire company are in attendance tonight as a gesture of gratitude for the years of support that the commissioners have given us. And we know that this year is not an easy budget year for you, and you've had to make some tough decisions. And we just wanted to let you know that we support you in what you've done up to now, and we appreciate what you've put in the budget for us this year. And again, we're just here to thank you for your support. In addition, we've been discussing bringing advanced life support into the township for quite some time now, and we are looking forward to the opportunity to make a presentation to that effect in whatever form you think is appropriate at your earliest convenience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Additional public comment?
Good evening. My name is Christina Peroni, and I would like to just make a comment regarding the ordinance that you're going to discuss with regard to charging and proposing to put a fee in for our universities and for our students.
Christina, when we consider that ordinance, that would be the appropriate time to comment.
I thought
Unless you have to,
I can't stay,
okay.
so if it's
Don't
okay.
wanna- If no one has an objection, fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. In particular, I am concerned that there are basically 7,600 households that are paying for our 30,000 residents. We have about, my understanding is 10,000 residents in Radnor that are students. And these students need all of our support with our police and our sewers and our roads. And while institutions definitely provide a great addition to our community and a great value, I feel that the scales have been tipped. You're going to hear that it's unfair to charge per student or charge in inspections, because there's a lot of people here from institutions who don't want to be taxed. But the taxpayers have been paying a heavy burden. And so I would ask you to consider going forth with this recommendation. I think Mr. Zinkowski has spent a lot of time trying to help us deal with our huge budget problems, and now is the time when we have to ask everybody to step it up. So since our institutions are a third of our community, it's time for them to step up to support our taxpayers. So I would ask the board to respectfully consider this tax to help the rest of the taxpayer residents.
Thank you, Christina. Any further general public comment?
I just want to, can we be, John Rice, you're.
It's not
should
a
you
tax.
Right,
It's
thank
not
you
a-
very much.
It's not a tax. It's a license fee.
Yeah. Any other general comment? All right, we'll move on to the departmental reports.
Move they be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any commissioner comments? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Committee reports, public health. John.
Thanks. We have Resolution 2010-69, which is to encourage the establishment of the Delaware County Department of Health. And we have two members of the Board of Health here to talk about this. We have Herb Hazan, the chairman, and Amy Wishner, member of the Board of Health. Could you two come up to speak on this issue for us?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity, and I want to thank the commissioners for considering this resolution, and obviously I'm here to urge the adoption. We've distributed some documents, which I think you all have, position paper of the Radnor Township's Board of Health, the League of Women Voters, Delaware County statement pretty much stating the same thing, and a recently completed study by the Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health, which they did under contract to the Delaware County Council, all of which deal with this issue. The League of Women Voters recommended the establishment of a county-based health department to provide basic public health services, monitor, target, and identify public health and safety issues, and improve the health of residents, to coordinate responses to public health and safety emergencies, and meet state and federal requirements. The League of Women Voters stated that without a county-level health department, Delaware County loses over $1 million in emergency preparedness funding each year. And I'll get back to that particular dollar concern later on, because I think that really understates the amount of money we're losing. Additionally, a county-level department would eliminate additional local municipal tax burden and consolidate county public health funding. As I stated before, in 2009, the Delaware County Council looked at the need for a county-level health department through a county-wide health assessment conducted by the Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health. And although that wasn't the primary purpose of that study, their findings do, in fact, highlight the need for a county-level Department of Health. This includes the fact that there are many valuable ongoing public health initiatives in Delaware County, but much of this work is uncoordinated, and the public remains generally unaware of these efforts. Public health in Delaware County does not function as a system. There is no known designated public health leader or centralized structure for public health information. Outside of the state-run health clinic, the Pennsylvania State Health Department has very little known presence in Delaware County. And the existing individual municipal health departments, such as our Radnor Township Health Department, which consists of one person basically, have varying capacities, service provision, and procedures, which can be confusing to residents and businesses with regard to local regulations, what services are provided, and how to access them. There is some awareness of emergency response activities in the county, such as drills and exercises, but a general lack of confidence that residents will get necessary information in a timely manner in the event of an emergency. And the perception that if there were a Delaware County Health Department, additional public health funding would be available from state and federal sources, as well as grants from foundations and other sources. Looking at all of this and having discussions at our public meetings of the Board of Health, among members of the board, it is the position of the Board of Health to support the establishment of a county-level health department in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. A county-level health department would not only centralize key public health tasks, such as service provision and health information distribution, it would provide additional sources of funding and revenue to support and enhance the health and well-being of Radnor Township residents. I mentioned before the League of Women Voters used the figure Delaware County loses over $1 million in emergency preparedness funding each year. But that's really basically, I think, just the tip of the iceberg. There are 3 counties outside of Philadelphia County, which of course has a health department, Chester, Bucks, and Montgomery, which have county-wide health departments. For Chester County in 2010, the budget was $10.5 million. $8.6 million of that was revenue. They had $8.6 million in revenue for a total of $1.9 million net cost to the county, or just about $3.81 per person in that county. They got their revenue from Act 12, $1.50 per capita, Act 315, $6 per capita, and $3.5 million in program-specific grants. In Montgomery County, the 2009, which was the latest that I was able to pick up information on, the budget was $9.4 million. Of that, $7.5 million was, they realized, not of that. Offsetting that was $7.5 million in revenue for a net of $1.9 million. I'm rounding off, obviously, or $2.47 per person in that county. In Bucks County, they had probably didn't go after some grants or funds that they might otherwise have been entitled to, but the picture was pretty much the same. They had revenues of close to $8.8 million to offset a projected 2009 budget of about $14.5 million for a net of $5.6 million, and that worked out to $9.08 per person. So those are the kinds of things that our county is missing out on, and I'm sure that we could realize those kinds of revenues and provide better services to the people in our county, as well as perhaps offset some costs to local townships such as ours. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. But again, I urge the passage of this resolution.
I have a couple questions. Do you have a Philadelphia costs per unit capita costs in Philadelphia?
I don't have that, but I think Philadelphia is a sort of a different kind of situation. They have a much more extensive health department there, and so I didn't really look that up for comparison purposes.
Any reason to think that we would be more comparable to Philadelphia than to, say, to Chester, particularly because of the southern Delaware County is much more like Philadelphia than Chester County, excuse me. So we as Delaware County would be more comparable to Philadelphia than we are to Montgomery or Bucks because of the size of.
Yeah.
Montgomery County includes Norristown, which is the
Okay,
poorest
so
place in the whole
you don't
state.
think we're comparable to Philadelphia?
Well, Philadelphia, it's a little hard because Philadelphia is also a separate grantee from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, so any CDC grants that go to states also go to specific municipalities, Philadelphia, Chicago, LA, and a couple other places. So they have sort of a separate funding stream than the kinds of things that county health departments would have.
So I'm interpreting your answer less comparable to
Right.
Philadelphia than to
Right.
these surrounding counties that you
Yeah.
mentioned.
I should add, Amy Wishner is not only the Vice President of the Board of Health, but she's probably the only person in the room who has actual experience working in the Department of Public Health, Philadelphia. So I think she knows something about their operations.
So, and then what are the particulars that that this organization would do for Radnor?
I think that the kinds of general things, I currently interact with health departments all over the state, and as well as having sort of in previous employment worked at the Philadelphia Health Department for 15 years. And the thing that I see, 11 years, misspoke. The thing that I see that we would get that we don't have are a couple of things. One is and I think we saw it with H1N1, it's a sort of good case example where we were literally 2 months behind the rest of the state that had health departments. I mean, Harrisburg was giving out H1N1 vaccine 2 months before Radnor Township. We had our program at the schools, and that's related to the fact that we don't have a kind of full-time lobbying effort. So we get, for a central authority like the state that is dealing with all the counties that don't have health departments, there are a few people who deal with, I'm not sure of the number of counties that don't have health departments in the state, but it's sizable. And so we're sort of competing with those people, with those other counties. We don't have kind of an inside track of people who are full-time kind of lobbying, making sure we get our share and making sure we get it in a timely manner. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is to provide a centralized, organized place where if you have a public health concern or question, you have one definite place to go other than Harrisburg. And also to be looking at the disease epidemiology of our county and focusing in on where problems are. And that can be things from infectious diseases, reportable diseases and conditions, where diarrheal disease rates in child daycare centers, something like that. Or it can be other kinds of public health things like teen suicide, binge drinking, other areas that we know that we have, issues with. So part of it is that sort of oversight of looking over, having someone whose responsibility it is to be monitoring our county's health as their first priority, not sort of among many competing priorities. I think also going after grants and programs, again, thinking about, okay, what would be really beneficial. Another thing is that we have so many resources. We have, several, we have Villanova University, Eastern. We have several schools that really could be, in a more organized fashion, working with us on public health issues. As it is now, those institutions it's very haphazard. If somebody happens to know somebody doing something, we have access to those resources. But if we had a Department of Public Health, we could really build in ongoing support for it in that area as well.
Very good. Two more questions, if you don't mind. One, the funding sources, the external ones that you mentioned, are they relatively stable? Because a concern would be if we take on this obligation and the state withdraws its funding, then we have, instead of a $2 to $4 million obligation, we have a $10 to $14 million obligation.
Well, the acts that I mentioned before, Act 12 and Act 315, are acts of the state government. They would have to be repealed, and I don't know, there's nothing that's certain for all eternity, but
Has
those
the
have
funding been steady, to your knowledge, then over the past
yes, it has,
however long these acts have been? placed?
decade or more.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah.
And then the last question, Herb, your board reviewed this formally and came up with this opinion?
Yes, in fact, we had a vote on it.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
It starts off that it says multiple studies, but you've only cited one tonight. And if I understood your point, the one you cited wasn't directly dealing with this issue, it just happened to generate ancillary data. Did I understand that accurately?
Actually, the League of Women Voters was another study that looked at that issue.
They actually did their own study, or did they
Yes,
do like
they
a
did.
survey?
I think you have, unless I'm mistaken in what documents you have, the League of Women Voters of Central Delaware County consensus regarding Delaware County Health Department, which they conducted in 2008. They conducted a consensus study to determine the need and feasibility of a county-level health department.
But you said
This is really a bare-bones summary of their findings.
All right. The other, just to be clear, if I understood everything you said, there are funding sources available, but this is not budget neutral. It might be budget neutral for Radnor, but on a higher level, the funding sources are less than the actual cost of running the program.
That would probably be correct. However, I think the net dollars are not excessive based on the experiences of the surrounding counties, to which I think Delaware County is comparable. Second, there is really no way of telling what the human costs might be in the event of a problem. Amy has cited the fact that we got our vaccine supplies last year for the H1N1 flu 2 months after counties that had health departments. Now, we're fortunate that no one became seriously ill in our township to the point of dying. But how do we measure that?
Is that a direct cause and effect, the fact that they had the county health department and we got it late? Because you said in the discussion although you don't have the specific number now. I think your words were many counties don't have a county health department. So,
Yeah, I think it's 61 that don't.
So-
My understanding is 6 have them and 61 do not. Is that right?
Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I think it sounds like there's more than 6. We just have 3 in southeast Pennsylvania. I know then Philadelphia County has
Yeah,
one.
So that's
4.
And Allegheny
County is
And
5.
Harrisburg was 6. So I was under the impression it was 6.
I'm certain Lancaster County has one.
Yeah.
7. Very good.
York,
I'd like to say that I am fully behind this resolution. I've been following this issue for 3 years. In fact, we are the largest county, Delaware County is the largest county in Pennsylvania that does not have a health department. What we have is a hodgepodge of 49 municipalities which have a patchwork of coverage on these issues. We have 8 state workers in Chester who are charged with, basically taking care of the entire county. And that compares to, as we heard earlier, I think 106 or 110 in Montgomery County in their public health. And I think you did a great job, Herb, of kind of talking about financially what it means to us. The numbers that I've heard are that this would cost county residents between $2 and $5 per person in the end, when you take in all the grant, federal, state money. But I wanted to just make the point of some of the things that happen when you're a county this big with populations as big as that we have, things that happen and things that have occurred and things that came out in these studies. And I'm just going to name a few of these things in Chester. In Chester, we have the highest infant mortality rate and the lowest birth rate in the entire state. We have the highest age-adjusted mortality for cancer. We have 2 times the national average in asthma in children, and 60% of the children in Chester have unsafe levels of lead in their blood. Now, what could a county health department? Oh, and one more thing: there's been an 80% increase in gonorrhea in this county since 2007, and a public health department educates, prevents on all of these issues, and environmentally, especially in the lower part of our county, it monitors, so that when there are unhealthy levels of whatnot in the air from refineries, they monitor, and when those levels go up, they take action. That has not been happening in our county at all. I mean, it happens, but it happens with a very limited staff, and it happens late, too late. And that's hence you have these results of a public that's really not getting the services that they need. I'm fully behind this. I'm thrilled to hear, I haven't seen the Johns Hopkins study yet. I'm thrilled to hear that it supports this action, and I really, really hope that we make some progress in moving forward with the county health department.
I likewise support this. I was able to attend the Delaware County Council's meeting on the H1N1 preparedness back, I guess it was about a year ago. And I think I was a little shocked and a little nervous when I left that meeting, because what I heard was a lot of the other counties in the town, in the state, who had health boards had pretty much a direct line to the federal supply. And when it came to our county, we were told that we could receive as many as 600,000 doses, and I think in the end we probably only received about 60,000 doses. So I was a little concerned that we really didn't have any system in place. You know, like it was described, we have a patchwork of Board of Healths in various townships. We're a first-class township. Many of the other boroughs in the county don't have any Board of Health departments. So I just think from a standpoint of public health for the whole county, but more important for us here, to have the benefit of having that county health office would be a good thing. I think it would put us in a good position.
Yeah, a number of years back when I was the chair of the Public Health Committee, we had a similar initiative. We went to Delaware County and asked them to consider putting in a Board of Health, and I recall the reaction at the time was it's just too expensive for them to start up something from scratch. I think the fact that you've demonstrated with your numbers that the actual outlay on an annual operational basis is not that significant on a per head basis really should sway them. I hope we were able to do so this time. But as I recall, it became a political issue with regard to the startup costs. So I think that's the hurdle you have to overcome.
Has anybody from your committee or your association actually gone down to the county and advocated directly for this as opposed to channeling it through Radnor Township?
Well, we thought we'd come here first and get your support. I think that would help immeasurably if we were to do that. The Board of Health, as you know, is an advisory body to this commission. I felt, as chair of that board, that it would be very important to get your concurrence first.
But you as an individual, an expert in the area, could go down, and you as an individual with your unique expertise could go down. So I'm asking not whether you've done it under the guise of Radnor Township, but as an individual citizen.
Well, I can just say between 1972 and 1980 as a county commissioner, I advocated this every year and never got support. So I think Radnor Township should be on record in supporting a county health department. It's very worthwhile.
Can I get my question answered, please?
At the meeting where the county commissioners were presented with the Johns Hopkins report, I was there. I did speak as a independent citizen saying I supported this. I mean, so they heard from one person. I think it'd be entirely different, or we'd have a chance of it being different.
Well, I'd like to remember, you vote. We don't, as a board, vote.
Yeah.
You vote as a citizen for them. So in many ways, your opinion, to a certain degree, can count more than ours. I'm just curious. So what was the reaction when you spoke? They just let you make your comments and say,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one thing. I mean, another thing that I saw with the Montgomery and Bucks and Chester counties with H1N1, with having departments of public health, is that they were really able to coordinate volunteer efforts. I mean, Bucks County did an amazing job of coordinating volunteers to give out vaccine. And so not only, whereas in Radnor, it was kind of left up to the superintendent, the school superintendent, Groveman, to in some way try and figure this out and coordinate it, which really isn't her job. So, I mean, that's another.
Amy, what I
Yeah.
saw was there was a lot of coordination. You can't take it away from the healthcare industry coordinated, the school districts coordinated. But really, at the end of the day, if you receive your vaccines 2 months late on a pandemic, that could be serious. That's a really big problem. Again, we were promised a large supply of vaccines for the county, 600,000 vaccines. I think the population in the county is about 1.6 million. And in the end, we didn't get even close to this. The 600,000 was the total for the state. So if you think about what a county health office can do, is they can really be an advocate for the health of every citizen of the county. But I think it is important for this board to stand up for this and say we want this, because we don't have the resources here in the township. We have we have a health officer, we have a board of health, but we don't have the structure and the ability to orchestrate a huge vaccination program if it's needed.
Ask a question about the Hopkins report also. I didn't see the conclusion that others have drawn that the Hopkins report supports the notion of a county health department. Do you think that's in that report? I thought it was very neutral to specifically states its neutrality toward the creation of a county health department.
Yes, it does. But what we've been saying, and what I believe is true to say, is that the implications of their findings
Yes.
with regards to the health of our citizens
Very good.
would indicate that there are many of the issues that they discovered.
So
in their
that's the
study.
nature of this question then. Tell me what's inadequate about the county response, because the county has responded to the report, and obviously you must think that's inadequate or you wouldn't be here advocating for this. So tell me, in your opinion, what's inadequate about the county's response?
Well, I think basically it gets back to the same sorts of things we've been talking about, Commissioner, is that we lack the ability to coordinate on a countywide basis in important public health addresses to important public health issues. Immunization is just one of them.
Right.
But I think Commissioner Schaefer has hit upon something very important. When you talk about the ability of a countywide Department of Public Health to monitor and evaluate different aspects of the public's health in our county, and to then make decisions based on that ability to monitor, you move away from that haphazard response, which is often more costly than an intelligent, fact-based approach to dealing with public health issues.
And the community, the county response to the Hopkins report won't adequately do the things that you just identified in your opinion?
I mean, the county, the Interagency Coordinating Council and the county health department do the very best they can with the resources they have. They're tremendously hardworking, and none of this is in any way to be critical of what they do. If you have a county health department, you have more people, you have actual programs to respond to health problems rather than only sort of delegated state workers to respond to kind of a specific outbreak or an uptick. But in terms of general prevention and disease epidemiology evaluation and action around a whole variety of public health issues other than those specific reportable diseases and conditions, which are mostly infectious diseases and conditions, where the state will actually allocate X number of person hours. It's just an entirely different thing, as well as this more general coordinating of resources in the county, like I mentioned, in terms of schools of health, schools of nursing, and volunteers who are available to respond to specific pandemics or other disease threats. I mean, we really dodged a bullet with H1N1, and in particular in this township we did. I mean, pediatricians and family medicine physicians were individually calling the health department to find out could they get vaccine. We had no public health lobby, to be able to advocate for them as a group and for our citizens as a group. We're at the mercy of a few people at the state level who do their very best. They work very hard, but they're pulled in a lot of different directions. And it really is a case of needing essentially, lobbyists and people and staff to do the work.
Under that logic, however, isn't it sort of us taking from our neighbor in one sense? Under your logic, the state should have a better program to make sure that the resources and the vaccine are distributed equitably throughout the state, not us lobbying to get more of our fair share.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If we may, I think maybe we're getting into the details that we're actually establishing the department tonight. I think all we're doing is looking to encourage the county to look at this and put a lot of information together, because in my opinion, we are very reactive and not proactive. The model is inefficient, not efficient. So I think what we're looking to try to do is move towards an area of being proactive and efficient and how we handle health. So, I mean, this is a bigger picture, so we're encouraging them to consider this. So I think there's a lot of discussion that'll be had, but I think some of the details you're drilling down into, I don't think we have any of those numbers, but I think really is we're trying to encourage the county to take a serious look at this and the establishment.
That's a very fair point, Bob, but just to comment the way it's written, it doesn't say to encourage the evaluation, it says encourage them to establish. And that's got me a little bit uncomfortable, because I happen to think that's overstated, and in the absence of a comprehensive picture, I'm uncomfortable with the strength of that statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll move
We
the
still
approval of
haven't
the
had-
resolution.
We haven't had,
Second.
okay, now we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion
Yeah,
amongst
I
the
have
commissioners?
one point. I mean, Elaine mentioned
Thank
that
you.
she's been studying it for years, but I've been studying it since Friday. I didn't receive any of the reports so to me, it might be what we should do, but I can't support this tonight because this is that's all the documentation I have. I went online to get some information, but I think more analysis needs to be done before we commit to this.
I thought you sent out an email with all the attachments.
Yeah, there was an email, I believe it was sent to the entire board.
Yeah.
It was sent to the entire.
It was
I don't recall
probably
getting
weeks
it.
ago. Yeah, it was at least three weeks ago.
Oh.
But anyway, I think at this point, the reason we have a commission, Board of Health, is to advise us on what we should be doing in this area. I have to rely on their expertise, and I trust them, and I think the guidance they're giving us now is good guidance. So I'm in full support of this, and I think we should just move ahead with it. We're not committing the county to doing anything. We're asking them to do this.
Also,
We don't
I've
vote.
similarly been involved with, as Elaine has, because of my association with the League of Women Voters. And in my past life, I was responsible for emergency preparedness at nuke plants. So one of the things I found through that is what's lacking in Delaware County is the coordination. You can't, if we had an H1N1 outbreak and it was a fast-moving outbreak, we would have been dead, because you can't get on top of that with a mishmash, helter-skelter, me calling my buddy who works in Marple type affair. And that's also, many of the functions that a county health board have already exist, but the way Delaware County has them arranged, they're not in a cohesive element. And I found out when we had done a survey of emergency preparedness not too long ago that there were departments that weren't talking to each other that both had a necessary role in emergency response. So, any further public comment? Thank you. Call the vote. All in favor?
Hold on a second, John Osborne here. I'd like to make a couple comments on this. I want to commend the people on the health board for working so hard. I thank them. Though I am kind of concerned about a trend that's been developing here. We have serious problems here in our township, but we've begun to take on national, state, and now county issues. We've looked into firearms, we're looking into human relations, and now we're telling the county how they should do their business. Now, this has been a political issue at the county for many, many years, as Mr. Spengler has said. Chester County spends $10 million on their health department. $8 million of that comes from the federal government. Is that funding secure in the environment we're living in today? We know that government has become very expensive. We're adding more expense to it here if we go ahead with this. I agree with Commissioner Curley that this deserves further explanation and study. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
It's 5-2. Any abstentions? Thank you.
No further report. Herb, and thank you for both coming in tonight. I appreciate it.
Public Works and Engineering, Bill. Public Safety, I'm sorry.
The first item on the
Can't
agenda
read.
for public safety is the staff traffic report. You have before you the report for November 16th, 2010. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, one question. The event for the speed humps on Aberdeen, when will that happen? AJ, is that,
It's up for review this staff traffic.
which is the 21st?
Correct.
Very good.
Move be approved.
Second.
Moved in second. Any further commissioner comments? By the way, if folks haven't ever attended a staff traffic meeting, I think you should avail yourself of it. It's not just a quick brush. It's a thorough investigation of the issues that are brought to them. I've been to half a dozen now, I guess, and I've been very impressed with them. Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The next item is Resolution 2010-71, which is essentially a request for a waiver of meter fees for this Saturday, December 18th, 2010. You have before you not only the resolution, but comment by Lieutenant Antonini, officer in charge. AJ, would you like to address this?
The Wayne Business Association approached the township requesting free parking on a Saturday. They could advertise it. Thought it would entice shoppers to the Wayne Business District. In addition, there is a business district down in Bryn Mawr, so to be fair, we were going to do it township-wide on a Saturday for everyone.
basically to encourage Christmas shopping, essentially.
Correct, and without fear of getting a parking ticket as well, so that if they're in the shops a while, either dining and/or shopping, leave, it would entice the people here and leave a good taste in their mouth when they're here.
Any comments by administration on this?
Well, we're in support of this. My understanding is in the past, they've requested additional time, up to 4 days, so this is only down to 1 day, so that's fine.
Just curious, why would you support this, but you've not been supportive of other waivers?
Well, here is, we've gone from 4 days down to 1, and to encourage shopping, and hopefully since we do get a business tax and mercantile tax, that it would be good to encourage that. So there's actually a benefit from that, because we do get revenues in other ways. When we waive fees, we don't get anything. So I think in the past, it's been 4 days, it's down to 1 day now. So it has been reduced, as well as there is a benefit to the local businesses, which we may see in return.
I would move the approval of the resolution.
Second?
Moved in second. Any further commissioner comments? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One other item which is not on public safety, but given the fact that we've had so many of the folks from the fire company come out tonight, I know they were interested in moving forward with a meeting of some sort, either with the full board or with the public safety committee, to consider a side-by-side comparison of the proposed ALS service by our fire company with Narberth, who was in at our last meeting. I wanted to get a feeling from the board, having considered this for about a week at this point, whether you think there should be a meeting of the full board, whether it be part of a regular meeting or whether it should be the public safety committee meeting and then coming back with a recommendation to the full board. I just want to get a sense so we can move forward and find out from administration where we stand with regard to collecting the information.
My opinion is that this isn't a policy decision, it's an administrative decision, so I don't think it needs to go to a subcommittee because we already made the policy decision to have it. It's just who should implement it, whether it's Radnor or the other fire company. And then I think it's going to be a very easy business decision to make. So my opinion is a minimal amount of information has to get to Bob, then Bob has to get to us, and then we make that decision at a regular meeting.
Dave, is it a hardship to present it to two? I would think not, but I don't want to speak for the time. I know you guys spend a lot of time and effort.
Define hardship. Actually, what's happened is if we're going to do this, the contract goes till the end of July. So what we were hoping was to get our budget approved tonight, and then literally we were going to start looking for an advanced life support coordinator starting tomorrow morning. So the longer we wait, the more we eat into the time we have available to implement that if you guys decide that that's what you'd like us to do. Certainly we think we can make a very compelling case for keeping it in the fire company, and we're just anxious to do that as quickly as we can.
I understand. My question is far more simple than that. We put these advisory boards and committees in place to help us make good decisions, and they often have expertise that we lack, and part of the process is for those experts to ask their questions to help us make better decisions. And my gut reaction is I'd rather it go through one of those committees first before it got to us, just
The committee we were talking about was the committee
of the
board.
Public safety.
That's
Committee of this
public
board.
safety.
Well, Hank, I'm very much in favor of being the Public Safety Committee because it doesn't require the full board, but I do think we need a thorough hearing of the issue since there are public safety implications, and at least there were assertions to that effect during the last presentation. So I think it's important for people to hear the facts, and then they'll walk away knowing that, comfortable that whatever decision we make is the right decision.
Is that the consensus of the board?
No, that's mine.
Well, it's going to come to this full board no matter what, and we're all going to debate it no matter what. So in the interest of time, I think there is a time issue here.
Yeah, but
I
we
would
don't have a
just
meeting
assume
until January
3rd.
3rd.
Right. So I would just as soon address it as a board on January 3rd.
To be fair, would you guys be ready on January 3rd, or do you need when's the next meeting? The 10th? We have a meeting on the 10th as well, I think, right?
If that was the question to me, I would be
He's
happy
ready
to make.
tonight.
Obviously,
Okay.
we want to do it whenever, but we're prepared to make our
All right,
presentation
I
whenever
just
you'd like.
recognize that folks go away for the holidays and things like that. And I didn't want to. So you guys are ready to go whenever
We're ready to go whenever you'd
All right,
like
so
us
let's
to.
do January 3rd. I'm okay.
And it's already in the budgets, and we're destined to approve the budget tonight, so if we decide to go the other route,
We have a
this
budget
would
savings.
be a lesser expense on the
Right.
budget, so we wouldn't have to alter the budget. You know, we wouldn't have to adopt a new budget.
I think we should do it at a regular meeting and just one
Okay.
meeting and done.
That would
Let's
be
try and do it
awesome.
January 3rd.
That's fine.
That would be fine.
Have you been working with Bob to get the information to him?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because the sooner we get that information with a side-by-side operational and financial comparison, the quicker we'll be in a position to make those decisions.
We had a preliminary meeting this morning in his office, so
Good.
we're prepared to go as quickly as we can.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
That's it for public safety.
Thank you, Mike. Public Works and Engineering, Bill.
Yeah, we have one item, authorization to go out to bid for street tree removals. This contract is for the large trees, and the Public Works Department is not equipped to handle these large trees. They're marked with X's, and the money's in the budget under the shade tree account, and I'll move the authorization to go out to bid.
Second.
Bill, I
Move-
just want to clarify that these are large trees that pose a safety threat, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Motion made and seconded. Any further board discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's it under Public Works and Engineering.
Thank you, Bill. Personal Administration, John?
We have several vacancies on our boards and commissions. So we have a vacancy on the Board of Health. We have 2 vacancies on the Environmental Advisory Board, and a vacancy on the on the Parks and Recreation Board. Please send your letter of interest and resume to the Township Manager, Bob Zinkowski, Radnor Township, 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania, 19087.
Are these the only vacancies? I thought we had one on the
We
planning
had
commission.
others.
This is the continuing list.
Of announcements.
These are
Correct.
additional.
Correct.
Okay.
There
And we
is a
have the
list
entire
on
list
the
on the
website.
website.
Yes, there is a list on the website that has all these detailed.
All right, item H, we have authorization to set the 2011 meeting dates and holidays. We have a holiday schedule in front of us. I'll just read the holidays. New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, Monday, January 17th. President's Day, Monday, February 21st. Good Friday, Friday, April 22nd. Memorial Day, Monday, May 30th. Independence Day, July 4th. Labor Day, September 5th. Thanksgiving Day, November 24th. Christmas Day, Sunday, December 25th. And New Year's Day, Sunday, January 1st. We also have a calendar in front of us. I will
John,
not
just
be reading
to
the
be
dates
clear,
on
I
the
think
calendar.
you missed the Monday dates
They're
on
closed
the
Monday.
Sunday
Yeah, the
holidays.
Sunday day, that's fine.
Right.
The day's closed Monday.
Yeah, well, if a holiday falls on a weekend, I believe the
closed
employees
Monday.
do take that day the following Monday.
I'll move the approval of the township holidays and our meeting dates.
I have a-
Two dates that are Sundays, not Mondays. The August meeting for the Board of Commissioners is set for the 21st on this calendar, and that's a Sunday. So I think we need to change that to the 22nd, unless we're coming in on a Sunday. And the September 25th meeting, that's a Sunday as well, so we need to change that to the 26th, which is a Monday. And I also just had the question, a lot of these commissioners' meetings are off-site, which I think is a great idea. And I just want to make sure we'll be filming and then, I guess, replaying later. So
That's correct.
Okay. There's no capability of doing it live,
No,
so you just replay?
that's correct.
Okay.
And just tell me the
Thanks.
reasoning why off-site.
I think it's a good idea to get out to the neighborhoods, one for the board to see some of these areas, but also two, to try to engage residents who may not find their way here, or also encourage them to come to a different type setting to participate in the different types of meetings.
But just to be clear on those remote meetings, Bob, I guess we do have flexibility to move them back here if needed, because perhaps if it's a, high priority, highly controversial issue, we're better off doing it here where
It
folks
could be
can
with
watch it
notification.
live.
Sure.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the board? Any public discussion? Mr. Gemmer.
Baron Gemmer, South Wayne. Thank you for bringing up the off-site issue, because I had that concern, and Elaine brought that up too. I think we need to be. I understand the reasoning behind it, and there is very good reasoning behind it. But I do think we lose a lot when the meetings are not broadcast live. It's when you have it taped, and then there's another commission meeting Tuesday, so somebody that works can't watch it for a few days, or if they forget about it. I think you lose a lot of participation for those folks that only watch at home and don't come. So I know it was, 2 years ago in 2009, we went to the firehouse, and I'm a little leery about going in February, because with being so open, it might be pretty cold in there. But I think we need to consider that there's 6 meetings here that won't be broadcast live, and a lot of them are, at least 4 of them are crammed in the front of the year. So please consider that, per what Kevin said, if it's important, that we might need to move it back here. Secondly, as I commented last summer, and perhaps with the board subcommittees meeting more often, this won't be as big an issue. We still only have the 1 meeting per month in the summer, which I know everybody likes to kind of take a breather then, but those become very long meetings because of that. So if we can try and manage the workload better, maybe we can avoid that. But if they become long, I would suggest adding meetings again, because it just becomes ineffective to have those long meetings for the things that still need to go over.
Thank you, Baron.
One question, are we bound by this, or we can change meeting times?
As long as we change in time to have public notice.
Hi, this is Christina Peroni. Again, I have to agree with what Mr. Higgins was saying. I'm really concerned. We spent $17 million on this building, and people are used to coming here, and I think that unless somebody is, we pay attention every couple weeks or is the meeting, and so, people are just going to show up here and the meeting's not going to be happening. So while I appreciate the intent of it, I think that, this is one case where repetition and consistency is really good. And the fact that we wouldn't have the meetings broadcast live, I think, is a real issue. So I would hope that you'd maybe reconsider it, and maybe at spur of the moment, you can go and decide if there's some really important reason to have XYZ meeting at the firehouse, then you go and do that. But otherwise, I would keep them all here, and if there's some specific reason, and then I'd say in advance every single, meeting for a month before, the February 14th meeting is not going to be held here. I just think you're losing a lot of consistency, and the point is to keep it public and open, and if we're not doing it live, we're going to lose some people. So I'd ask you to reconsider your vote on this issue and keep the venue here.
Well, just to be clear, right, we're just voting on dates, not necessarily locations tonight, correct?
No, we're voting on locations.
Okay, maybe we should
They
just...
can be changed.
Okay, fair enough. Let's...
Patty Barker, Garrett Hill. I just wanted to applaud this decision to come out into the neighborhoods. I think it's a great way to reach out to the community and get more people involved. I think Christina makes a good point that we need to be reminded about it. But I think it's an admirable way, and I think, at least when you come to Garrett Hill, I think that you'll have a pretty good turnout there. And it shows that the commissioners are interested in the neighborhoods, not to insinuate that you're not, but I just think it's a great PR device for getting people more involved. So I would like to encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny.
Chip Layfield, Wayne. I know for many years, John, when you were on the park board, we'd always go to the Willows and hold an annual meeting there, and the senior center sometimes. And I just look at the fact that we're talking now about mothballing the Willows. Year after year we went. To what benefit? So I do question, to what benefit we'll get going out to the neighborhoods. Thanks.
Any further public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's it for personnel, John?
No further report.
Thank you. Don, Community Development.
Sure, the item is adoption of ordinance 2010-41. So is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
I move to adopt ordinance 2010-41, amending Chapter 226 Rental Properties, Article 1.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion by the board.
My only question is the universities. We're going to inspect, we're creating a fee so that we can go and inspect all these. It's going to be revenue neutral. I mean, isn't there a way where we could do a checkoff list and not get into this big program that, I mean, we have a problem with the rental units we have now, and now you're going to go in and inspect every dormitory every year?
If I can just address for the folks that are sitting here that don't have copies of the ordinance that's been advertised for tonight. You introduced this ordinance. This is an amendment of Chapter 226 and made a couple edits to it that night and eliminated what was existing in your ordinance, which was an exemption for the universities in the township from any rental inspection and any fees. So that's being eliminated, and we're specifically adding the dormitories and on-campus housing along with all the other rental units. In terms of, Commissioner Spengler, your issue of implementation of this, I think what it's, at least my discussion with community development is they're going to put together over the first 6 months of next year, they're going to have to put together an inspection program to see that not only the off-campus rental units are being inspected, but the on-campus rental units would also be inspected under the life safety codes and the other codes that are applicable. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that. I don't think Matt at this point has a specific schedule, but until the ordinance gets adopted, he's not going to be able to put that together. But the idea, as I understand it, is to license. I mean, this is a licensing ordinance for all rental units. We're doing it now. We're doing it off campus. This would add any on-campus rental units, including the dorms, including houses, including apartments. So the implementation of it is something that's going to take probably, I suspect, 3 or 4 months. It's going to generate some revenue, which should be, assuming it's going to be revenue neutral until we do this. We have some estimates of what our costs are going to be. We have outside agencies that do these types of inspections. So that's where we're at with this. This is up for, obviously, a public hearing, and I see at least 2 attorneys that are lining up to have their public comments, and there may be more hiding out in the back of the room. I don't know. But that's where we're at on this ordinance at this point.
I don't see the extraction of the section exempting educational institutions.
Yeah, let me just for anyone in the audience and the commissioners, when I walked in the meeting room tonight, what was on that table was the original draft that was
Right.
introduced.
And that's what we got in our packets.
Correct.
So
But
what was advertised?
what was advertised, you should have a November 23rd, 2010 date in the upper left-hand corner of what was advertised. And it was advertised.
That's what Matt just handed out?
Right. It was advertised in December 1st in the Main Life Suburban. Was sent November 23rd. And basically, what you did at the introduction, the night this was introduced, is you eliminated that exemption, and the only other change was that in the existing Chapter 226, there's a reference in the current code to BOCA, National Building Codes, and BOCA, National Fire Protection Code. So those standardized codes have changed. So in the draft that was, the final draft that was advertised, that was changed so that Section 2 of the ordinance would reference Uniform Construction Code and National Fire Protection Code, and not the old BOCA codes, which have been replaced since the statewide construction codes were implemented. So there are the 2 things you did on November 22nd when the ordinance was introduced. That ordinance was advertised, and I noticed the original draft on the table when I walked in. That's why I told Matt to see that we had the right copies available for the board and the public.
And what did we have posted on the website, in the packet? Probably the...
Don't know what was posted. don't do that. But the draft that was advertised, it was lodged at the Delaware County Law Library. It was available here at the Township Building. They're the requirements under your charter in terms of advertising.
I have a couple of questions. Do we know that other municipalities in Pennsylvania are doing this?
I'm not aware of any, Don.
And then do we have any
Can
intent?
I just ask clarifying, Matt, does that mean you're not aware of any that are doing this, or you didn't do research to find out the answer to
I
that question?
did. I did do research in
Okay.
the area and in the state. I didn't find any other municipality performing these inspections.
Okay, and then my understanding is we're not going to inspect public housing and senior living. Just tell me the rationale for why we're choosing dormitories but not public housing or senior living.
Well, Bob and I spoke about this. We think those was good recommendations. John Rice has some concerns with the Delaware County Housing Authority. If we have that power to do that, he's going to investigate that. But that's
Okay,
a good.
so you haven't ruled that out at this point, like if
Not at this point. No, not
this
at this
could be a
point.
stepping stone to it if.
That's
very well.
correct.
All right. Is there a backlog of complaints? Do we have citizens that are concerned about conditions in the dormitories? Is that the driving force behind this? What's the driving force?
The issue is being fair across the board on all rental issues. But again, we don't know what exists because the township has never made inspections.
So
I think
we're
it's
not
long
getting, we're
overdue.
not getting citizen complaints about dormitories in Radnor? Is
Not that I'm
correct?
aware of.
Not that I'm aware of, Tom.
And then we also, do we know if the inspections are occurring at the universities? You indicated to me that you believe Villanova has a program, but you are not aware of whether the others do or don't.
I'm not sure. Their attorney can certainly address that issue. We met with Mr. Cornelia last week. He talked about that with Villanova officials. They have their own inspections programs. We received the last year's results, but prior to that, I have no idea what the records are and what the safety,
Very good.
their safety record is.
And I have two questions for Mr. Rice. One, it's been mentioned at the board that we would have liability if something goes wrong at a dormitory, but I'm not aware that that would be the case. Is that true? Do we have any liability if
When you say something goes wrong,
there's a fire at a dormitory, does Radnor have liability?
as a result, if we implement this program,
Well, starting now, and then if we implement it, would we have different liability?
I don't believe we would, not for inspections.
So do we have liability now?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
I mean,
So
there's
just to be,
there's a Municipal Tort Claims Act which has exemptions in it, protects the township, any municipality, from liability for certain things that they undertake. Inspections, I believe, were exempt from that. Zoning inspections, building inspections, those types of things under that act.
So we have no liability now, and we wouldn't incur any more liability should we adopt this. Is that
I don't believe this will change our liability, the fact that we're undertaking this.
okay? And then it's also, I believe it's inaccurate that it's been stated that I think there's a problem with rental units, but I don't think this is going to have any impact on that problem. So if there's a problem with dormitories, I think we need to address it. But the issue that we're going to have with rental units in the township, I think we're going to address through the fee change. So I don't see the need for this at this point. I don't see it being advantageous to Radnor.
I just have a question, Bill or Bob. While it's characterized as revenue neutral, I think people are just misusing terminology. It can't be revenue neutral since we get revenue. But what was described to me was the revenues that we generate have to be in general approximation to the costs of administering the program, including overhead, et cetera. When I look at how this translates into our budget, I see a line item for revenues of something on the order of $600 and something thousand on housing, and I see a cost under community development for part-time wages and overtime for a total of about $102,000. So help me understand how the revenues being generated translate into approximate costs for administering the program.
Sure. The fees that are budgeted are anticipated for personnel would be on the rental side. We're also, though, until we actually recognize the revenues from these fees collected, I don't think it's appropriate for us to move, put those numbers within the budget, because we will have to go out for RFPs for these to retain a professional service. So at that particular time, we will come back to the board based on the revenues that are coming in to make recommendation award of that contract to do the inspection fees, services, I'm sorry.
I'm a little confused by the answer, Bob. So I'm looking at page 49 of the budget, and the line that's identified as 013203062 housing has $684,450 as revenue for 2011 versus a revised actual of about $94,000 for this year. I made an assumption, maybe it's an inaccurate assumption, that that significant increase is tied to the institution of these fees. Is it or is it not?
A portion of that is. It is not the full amount, because I believe there is at least half of that is related to the rental units within the township, not the universities.
There is an increase. I believe there's an increase in the inspection fee from the prior year. We're going from 75 to 100.
That's correct.
So there's a 25%.
Yeah, but if you go from 93 to plus 25%, that puts you in the 115 range.
No, the issue is that, as I understand it, is that we're going to charge these fees, but we're really not going to implement it for a year to get the full expenditure. It's going to be a partial expenditure
So we're
this
collecting
year.
the money and the inspection in advance, and the inspections occur, the cost of the inspections occur later?
Well, the bills won't go out until sometime, I believe, in July.
We're going to begin the mailing. For the already licensed rental units will begin in early May. The 3,300 rental units we have in place. Now, for new units, I'm not sure when that would begin. We would have to start that process sooner rather than later, but maybe the springtime, and understand how many units there are exactly. As Nick will tell you that there's 2,000 at Villanova, but we're not really sure how many Cabrini and Eastern and Valley Forge have.
So where'd the 684 come from?
I think that came from an estimate of the number of units, but at this point, it is just an estimate.
And does the cost of doing the inspections that's included in community development align with the projected number of units in the revenues? It doesn't look that way to me. I mean, I'm having a hard time understanding how I generate.
The costs are going to be incurred next year, not this year. Most of the costs, we won't be up and running to get the program.
And then you may have an accounting issue with how you're booking your revenues and your expenses. I mean, you know.
Kevin, I'm aware too. First of all, the fees are going from $50 to $100 a unit over next year, and those revenues would include, correct, Matt?
Yeah, they're going for it's 50 to 100, correct, but we've always charged, the policy's 10 or 11 or more has always been $15. Those will all now be $100.
There was a sliding scale.
And that's the bulk of, that's about 2,100 units right there. Have always been charged $15.
So 2,100 units are going from, it's going to see an $85 increase.
That's correct.
And those are existing
Licensed rentals, correct.
Non-campus rental units.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to address Commissioner Curley's concern about why we're doing this and what the problem is. And I see it from a different standpoint. We inspect all of our all of our apartment houses. We don't inspect them because we've had complaints or because they're particularly onerous we inspect them because we're protecting the public health, safety, and welfare. So since we do that for all of our apartment houses already, I don't understand why we would exempt apartment houses that happen to be on campuses. It's the same structure. And for all of this time, and apparently in most of Pennsylvania, it's okay to inspect, or we have this need to inspect apartment houses for health, safety, and welfare, but for whatever reason, we don't go onto the campuses, when you have, I would assume, all the same issues with many, many people living under one roof. So I
My
think.
point is, don't make that assumption. Find out if there is a problem. I mean, the reason why we inspect apartments is if we didn't, we would find out very quickly because we have problems. We know those problems. We don't know that there's a problem on dormitories. So before we make this decision, we should find out if there's a problem with dormitories.
And how do we do that?
I'm not going to solve that problem tonight. I'm just saying
I think we
should
need an
find.
inspector to inspect all the units to tell us if there's a problem.
And I also think, too, is interesting that there was going to be a fire test at Villanova University. And there was going to, what the building codes official wanted to do is pull the alarm in one of the dorms and just see how the response was. And Villanova did whatever they could to, try not to do that. So I will just do that. Point of order. Well, the issue is, I mean, the question was asked. So that's what there was. I saw the emails back and forth to where the university wanted to go through a lot of protocols and that, which I'm not aware of. Possibly when fires occur, that there's a protocol prior to that event even happening. So I think, again, public safety is the concern here. Maybe we can work on the same policy that the universities do on how they bill for their classes. I'm sure they bill after the semester is done, after the students have completed their classes prior to. So I think what we would want to do is try to do the same thing with the township, is that we'd want to receive the dollars up front prior to doing that. So I think maybe it's a change in how we operate.
So I just want to comment. I agree with what Commissioner Schaefer said, that we have an obligation for protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the students as well as any other tenants in the township. Don, to respond to your concerns, until you get into a dorm, you don't realize what's there. I had the advantage of firsthand experience here. Two of my sons have gone off to college, and I was really surprised to find out that when a student elects to have a room with 4 students, it's the same room that you would have 2 students in, but now there are 4 in the same room. And you essentially have a very tight space with 4 students. And I would be surprised if that university that my son is attending, I won't name it, but is in fact in compliance with occupation limits. Because what they're doing is they're offering a discount to the student, but at what cost? You're saving some money, but maybe at the potential loss of life. So I think it's important to have these inspections. I think it's fair. We inspect all of the other rental units in the township. We can't just pretend that those other rental units are somehow protected. So I think it's important to move ahead with this. I'm in full support of this.
Any further commissioner comments?
I'd like to hear what the folks have to say.
Yeah. Public comment. Guess you count as public, right, Nick?
Yeah, I guess. Okay. I won't say where Nick Keneally, I'm representing Villanova on this matter. Also present is Chris Schubert, who's representative of Valley Forge Military Academy, and also in the audience tonight are representatives of both Cabrini and Eastern College. What you have to understand is that the universities and the colleges, including Valley Forge, are under federal and state guidelines for inspections for their dormitories. They have various guidelines they have to meet from a federal and state regulation process in order to be approved for their dorms. For example,
Nick, can I ask, what's the ongoing process for making sure they remain compliant under those, or are you going to get to that?
Yeah, I'll just give you an example what Villanova does, which is very similar to what Cabrini does and Eastern and the rest of them. For example, Villanova has fire drills 3 times a year. They have random room safety inspections 3 times a year. This is each room. They have testing of fire alarm devices 3 times a year. They have emergency egress signage and doors inspections 3 times a year. They have sprinkler system flow tests 4 times a year. They have main campus fire pump flow and pressure testing once a year. They have fire extinguisher inspections monthly. They have emergency generators run and transfer tests monthly. They have fire alarm devices and complete systems maintenance inspections once a year, and they have fire hydrant inspections and testing once a year. They have to file with the federal government, they have to get approval from the federal government, and they have inspections from the federal and state government for that process. Obviously, the institutions, it's very important for the institutions and in their best interest to provide safety for their students. If they're not providing safety for their students, no one's going to send, parents aren't going to send the students to the colleges. So it's very important the colleges actually publish safety inspection reports, and they're required to do that. And that they are actually on the website. I have copies here of both Cabrini and Villanova's safety inspection reports if the board would like to see them. I'd also like to point out the statute itself. This statute is a student housing residential statute in the residential neighborhoods. That's what the statute is. I have not seen this revision, actually. The agenda that is on the website include the old statute that did not include what John had mentioned about being removed. So everything that I've seen, I don't think I've seen the statute you are now looking at, because it was never, as far as I know, it was not put on the agenda. I don't know. John says it was advertised properly.
You're
I don't
talking
know.
about the ordinance?
The ordinance itself,
Okay.
yes. The other thing, none of the schools are ever consulted about this and was never asked for any input. The only way that these schools found out about it is that you're hearing someone who actually, I think, had a connection to Villanova, called Villanova and said, do you know they're trying to pass a rental housing ordinance that applies to your dormitory rooms? That's how we found out about this. We have had no input at all on this ordinance. We have no input on the type of inspections that would be required or necessary. If the township wants to do the inspections, we don't have a problem with that. Of course, if they are, in fact, revenue neutral, which I will get to in a minute. Also, when you look at the ordinance, it states if there's disruptions that the landlord, which in this case would be the institution, could lose their rental license. In other words, the township could put these schools out of business. And you're not talking about disruptions, fire disruptions. You're talking about excessive noise and disruptions that aren't even criminal in nature. If you look at the ordinance, they talk about disruptions not criminal in nature, and you could lose your rental license as a result of those disruptions. We're talking about dormitories in the middle of a college campus, not something in the middle of a community. Also, there's requirements about attaching this ordinance to every dormitory agreement, room agreement, for each student in the university. That is in this ordinance. Again, it's not really for the colleges, but the way it's drafted right now, the colleges fall into it. And they're required to provide an application for each of the rooms, which in Villanova's case is $2,000. They're required to make application, pay the fee of $100, which is being proposed, and also attach this ordinance to their dormitory agreement with every student that comes in. It also talks about eviction proceedings, and it says how the landlord is supposed to commence eviction proceedings. The schools don't want to be involved in landlord-tenant eviction proceedings with their students. If someone messes up on campus, they want to let them go and go through their own process, not through a landlord-tenant district justice type proceeding. Again, I don't know if that's the intent or what was really planned by this, but the effect of this is making the colleges bound by a student rental residential ordinance in the communities. It has nothing to do with college campuses. Let's talk about the fees. Villanova, 2,000 rooms. Valley Forge Military Academy, 350 rooms. Eastern College, 587 rooms. Cabrini College, 513 rooms. 3,450 rooms. Already, according to some notes that I saw previously, there's 3,300 rental units already in the township, not counting the colleges. That's 6,750. At $100 each, that's $675,000. This has to pass a smell test. As you're well aware, this is a licensor fee. This is not a tax. I find it hard to believe that the township's going to spend $675,000 on dormitory room inspections. The current budget that's before the township for approval this evening, the whole community development, matter of fact, it's interesting that I just mentioned 675 rooms. The housing component in here calls for $684,450. And it's exactly what the number of rooms are. You look at the whole community development yearly fee proposed for 2011 is $459,000. That's for the whole community development. That's for permitting. That's for everything community development does. So we're talking up on collecting, as a result of these rental fees, $675,000, which will cover more than the entire community development budget. This has to pass the smell test. It's clear this is not, revenue neutral. This is a tax. If the township wants to inspect rooms, we're willing to work with them, put together a process to have them inspect the rooms properly, but not under this. And the other thing we don't understand is why the urgency in passing this now. Why did we have no input in it? Why are we before you this evening in short notice arguing against it? It's just, we're willing to discuss this.
Could I answer a question, Nick?
Yeah, sure, Hank.
If I understand your argument correctly, there is no preemption either by state or federal law over a municipality doing this sort of thing. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm not certain of that, Hank. And Chris, I don't know if Chris looked into that. I believe he did.
And give me a preview.
Chris Schubert here tonight on behalf of Valley Forge Military Academy. And as always, Nick has kind of stolen my thunder and raised much of the issues that I had concern about with regard to this ordinance as well. But on the issue of preemption, and unfortunately I haven't done a thorough analysis on the issue, only from the standpoint that we've just recently received notification that this ordinance was being proposed for adoption tonight. And as a result, I have not had a sufficient time to really take a look at the issue, but from what I was able to take a look at on Friday as well as over the weekend and today, was the state already provides inspections and licensings for these institutions. Essentially, as far as Villanova, as far as Valley Forge Military Academy is, as it applies, there is a state statute that is on the book that requires an institution like that to actually go out and have inspections done. And the statute itself says that the Fire and Panic Act, which is also another state statute, requires inspections to be done pursuant to a licensing, which occurs on an annual basis. Now, short of that, as Nick has explained, each of the institutions has its own inspection process that it goes through. Valley Forge Military Academy is no exception to that. They also go through their own inspection process as well. So from the standpoint of providing for the public health, safety, welfare, which I know was Commissioner Schaefer's concern, that's already being taken care of.
I asked the question advisedly because I don't necessarily think that there is preemption, either express or field or otherwise, because there's nothing in the state licensing statutes which specifically state, much like the Firearms Act, that this is the law and local municipalities can't address it. And I'm somewhat familiar with federal preemption, and as I said before, I don't think there's any express or field preemption, because I don't think that this is a matter which is exclusively, like immigration, for example, which is of federal concern. Obviously, licensing is a particularly local concern when it comes to rental units. So that was my first question. The second question is, I think your objection is not to the fee being charged, you just take exception to the amount of the fee being charged. Am I correct?
That is correct in that regard, Hank, but also the statute has to be looked at. We can't, the way the statute is written, as I mentioned, it provides a situation where these colleges could be put out of business if for excessive noise, for example, coming out of one dorm room. And I know that wouldn't be the intent, and you could say all you want, it'll never happen, but it's in the statute.
Well, with all due respect, I know you said that these dormitories aren't out in the middle of the community. You talk to anybody who lives anywhere near South Campus of Villanova, and they'll tell you that dormitory is in the middle of their neighborhood. And there's a list of other places and other locales. So in any event, I mean, you and I can agree to disagree on those things, but I don't think I don't think there's preemption. I think it's simply a matter of what is a fair value or what is a fair fee to be charged for these inspections, because I think we're legally entitled to do them.
And Hank, remember too, you may be aware, and I think it was mentioned last time, there's a billboard case where they were charging $100 for inspections of billboards. I think it's called Martin something, or I have the case here somewhere. They said that if you have multiple billboards together, you can't charge $100 for each one because it doesn't cost. Again, it has to be a revenue neutral type of thing, similar to dormitory rooms.
As I said,
It's a billboard, though, sitting along a highway. Nothing happens.
And a dormitory room, when you have a
Which
row of
changes,
30
which
dormitory rooms that
changes
you're
all the
walking in?
time. People come in, they move out, they plug things in, they alter it. I mean, this is a traditional life safety inspection program. It's not a billboard inspection program.
John, it just, in all due respect, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Well,
It really doesn't.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, real quickly.
That's what it comes
I
to.
just wanted to identify, excuse me,
Nick,
let me
you
wrap
made
this
comments.
up, John, excuse me.
Okay, sure.
My point being, I think there were two main issues which I've tried to highlight and identify, and I think I've gotten the answers to those. One, there is no preemption, and two, it's simply a matter of getting to the right number. That's all.
And again, on the preemption issue, again, I just don't know if there is or is not. Again, we haven't really had a sufficient amount of time to review that, but there is a process already in place for federal and state regulations on that. And certainly, absolutely no question, there's an issue on the fee that's being charged for this. I believe the old fee was for apartments where you would pay $50 per apartment up to 10, and then over 10, I believe it was either $15 or $25.
15.
$15 for everyone after that. I don't know if that's fair or not, because, again, we haven't been involved in the process. So I really don't know what the township intends as far as these inspections are concerned.
Maybe it's simply a matter of getting this particular ordinance passed and then making sure as we go forward that the fees that are charged are appropriate. Because this thing isn't specifying the amount of the fees, it's simply putting into place the inspection process.
But then later on this evening, you're going to approve the amount of the fees.
I understand that, and we can always change that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, real quickly, I just want to discuss, looking at the budget and talking about how much the Community Development Department costs. When you take a look at, and there's a lot of expenses that are associated with each department, not just community development, but all the operating departments in the general fund that have expenses that are grouped together and lumped together elsewhere in the budget. Those include the health care costs for the employees, the workers' compensation for the employees, the pension for the employees, as well as any other post-employment benefit costs associated with current employees. In total, when you roll those up, the 2011 estimate for community development, the direct cost, is roughly $770,000 for the department. And some of the indirect costs that aren't included in there are the vehicles that they use to travel, the associated costs with those, the building space, the software improvements, some of which is included in the 11 budget for that department. So in developing the $100 per unit fee, when you roll up all the costs of the department, it greatly exceeds the amount that is just associated with that particular department within the general fund.
Well, Nick, we're going to probably hire an outside concern if we do this, so that will be an expense that will be added on. And the fee has to be, under law, revenue neutral, so we can argue that, but we can come up with the right figure and the right number. But my question is, does the university, do they check for loose wires and GFIs, and
Right.
they do all that?
If you look at Villanova's, you're not allowed to have certain items on campus. Matter of fact, they talk about no candles and holiday decorations, smoking, things of that nature. They're expressly prohibited, in the dormitory rooms. As I said, Bill, obviously, the students are the resource of these universities. They're not going to do anything that puts these kids in danger. And it is very important for these rooms to be inspected, to be inspected properly, and not to have fires. In the Villanova report, they mentioned their fires have been limited. I think last year they may have had 6 fires in dorm rooms. The most out-of-pocket expense, the most damage was $100 to the dorm room. So certainly it was something that wasn't spread. Matter of fact, I think a lot of them were violations. The kids may have had candles or something in the dorm room. But again, there was no excessive damage or anything of that nature. And I think, outside of false alarms, I don't think there's many calls to the universities on this fire safety. But let's not get beyond the ordinance itself, too. Hank, I see your point and again, if the township wants to inspect, and it's going to be a reasonable inspection, it's going to be revenue neutral, my belief is that the schools wouldn't object to that. But if you look at the ordinance, you're lumping us in with student housing in the community. And that's what that ordinance, as you all know, that's what it was really directed to initially when it was first adopted. And I just go back to the fact, too, it's not only the ordinance, but the fee of $675,000. I can't imagine the township is going to be spending $675,000 on inspecting of dorm rooms, and why would you want to? Particularly since you know what the colleges are doing.
How often do the dorm rooms turn over? They turn over every year? There's a different person in every room?
Every year they turn over.
So they have inspection,
They're
and they
inspected,
turn
as I
over.
mentioned, 3 times a year they have inspections.
Who does those inspections,
The
Nick?
university does under the guidance of the federal and state regulations. They have to file reports with the
Is there
federal and
anybody
state.
from the state or the federal government that comes in?
I really don't. I'm sure that the state comes in. I'm not certain. I wouldn't think they would be there for every inspection of every room. I
Can
would
you
doubt it.
imagine how inappropriate it would be if we had this on the books and we asked the owners of our apartment buildings to go do these inspections for us and report back to us? I mean,
But, Elaine, it's a little bit different situation. You're dealing with universities and their students. I mean, they have a vested interest in their students here. It's a totally
Landlord has
different
a vested
circumstance
interest
than
in keeping
than a
his
landlord-tenant
property intact.
relationship. It's a different relationship between a landlord and tenant relationship than a university or a college or a school having with the students. Now, I'm really at a loss on why the township wants to even get involved in this outside of the fact that the intent is to make money. And I think there's other ways to do that, not by instituting this ordinance if in fact it's going to be revenue neutral, which again, I just find it real hard to believe that it's a revenue neutral ordinance with the fees that are being charged.
And if I might, I would just make one final comment. What I heard tonight is that this ordinance does not apply to public housing or to senior residential housing. So if that's the case, then I would have a concern with the way this ordinance is now proposed of an equal protection issue. And that's why I think we have the concern that it appears that this ordinance is being cobbled together to make it work for the universities, tagging it on to what was originally the intent was for student housing regulation. I think if the universities were plugged into the process and we had an opportunity to get together with the staff and with the township, with the commissioners, that we might be able to fashion a better ordinance, an ordinance that would be more particular to the uniqueness of the universities as opposed to something that's cobbled together here. So I don't see
How long
any
would
real-
that take you?
Well, we'd certainly be willing to meet
How long would it
quickly with
take you to
staff.
have, in your opinion, a revised acceptable ordinance? 30 days?
I would think, again, we would have to have cooperation from the township, though,
I
too.
suspect they'd be cooperative. I just want to.
Yeah, I don't know and I don't know if they know what they're intending or how they're intending to inspect. We would have to know what they're intending to do as far as the inspection is concerned. And from what I'm hearing, we don't know what that is. All we know is that $675,000 or $684,000 is coming in the township coffers without any inspection process.
We already do inspections of rental properties.
Yes.
We have a process. We have licensed inspectors that do those inspections. Do your staff at the university, are they licensed inspectors?
What do you mean by a licensed inspector?
In the state of Pennsylvania, we have licensing for health
Um,
and safety officers. We have licensing for building inspectors.
But we also have licensing here from the state and federal regulations that we have to comply with.
But we have, our inspectors are trained and they are licensed to perform inspections in electrical, plumbing, health and safety. So our inspectors are licensed. And if we don't have the staff on hand, we will hire licensed inspectors to do the inspections. What I'm hearing is a lot of whining, and this is disturbing to me because I graduated from Villanova University. And one thing I don't understand is you want to be part of our community, but you don't want to be part of our community. Now let me give you an example. Villanova University has a security department, does it not?
It does.
And do you know how many security officers you have?
I do not.
It's around 40 to 45. This is a stack of the police reports that resulted from the students at Villanova University. This is 7 months.
And John, what does it have to do with what we're discussing here?
It has a lot to do with it.
Tell me.
Because when we talk about the universities self-policing themselves, doing their own inspections, what I say is the university said they were going to do the same thing with security. And yet, look at the burden on our taxpayers right here.
Are they on campus?
This is all on campus, surrounding the campus, right on the campus. Okay.
Now, what's surrounding, for example, you're talking about parties where there's underage drinking, I assume. And
These are numerous. These
also.
are every type of incident having to do
And
with
how do
the
you, are they?
campus.
Are you? And you know they're Villanova students.
These are all campus addresses right here. So the point I'm trying to make is, while I have full faith in all the institutions to do what's best in the best interest of themselves and the students, I think this township has a responsibility too. We perform that responsibility every day with the police department. We are willing to respond to calls on the campus. We do police the campus. But the campus has told us that they have their own security department. So here's a case where the universities want to tell us they're going to do their own inspections, and I say, well, you know what? I think we better do that too. So I have a lot of faith in our township's ability to perform qualified health and safety inspections. We do this already with all the other rentals. I don't see that we can exempt anyone from this. The university is exempt from taxes. This is not a tax. This is a fee. The university is not exempt from health and safety rules. It's
But John,
just
you are exempting. You're exempting, as we just stated here earlier. You're exempting nursing homes. I haven't seen anything about doing inspection in businesses.
Nick, that's incorrect. There's no exemption of nursing homes or any of the other institutions that Mr. Schubert's concerned about. In fact, based on the comments, this is a rental. The existing ordinance has sections on students, but it is a rental housing ordinance. There's no exemptions in here for any of those other organizations. We haven't been doing those, from what I've been told, but we may start doing them now. So, I mean, that's an interpretation that we're going to have to look at, whether or not the County Housing Authority and those other agencies that receive some kind of federal funding would fall underneath us. But there's no exemption. We just have not been doing that. But based
John,
on your
there's
recommendation, we may have to start that.
But John, there's nothing here with nursing homes. I don't see anything in here specifically with.
They're not
nursing
exempt. I mean,
Well,
we may.
but there's nothing in here saying that they have to have inspections done. There's nothing in here that says businesses. How about
But
a
my
business,
my
a
point
major
is that
corporation?
my point is I believe that they're covered under the existing ordinance. We just have not been doing it in the past. That's my point. I don't think we need to add them to include them in this inspection if it's a rental unit that meets the other parts of the ordinance. That's the point.
And based on the recommendations that you brought up this evening, I think you've made some good points, so we will walk down those roads there too, and let them know that, these items were brought up and that we will expand that search and the inspection, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Nick.
Again, I think you know our position on this, and
So is there any mood among the commissioners to
Well, there
table
might be
this?
more public comment.
I don't know that I'm excluding public comment, though.
Okay.
I would just like to hear what folks have to say before we have that discussion.
Come on up.
as I said, we're not going to bring up the people from Valley Forge, Cabrini, and Eastern. They're going to just state the same thing that we've stated here this evening. So it's to move the meeting along.
Well, in general, we ask public commenters
Sure, I
if they
understand,
have the
yeah.
same comments, not
Yeah,
to
right.
belabor it over and over.
And you're representing,
Villanova in this instance.
Villanova.
Cabrini and Eastern are both here with their school representatives as well.
They would simply echo your comments?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carl Aldermere from Eastern University, and just one quick reference to Mr. Fisher and asking about whether or not we have licensed people come and do the inspections. There are a few inspections that we do that are required to have licensed inspectors to come in. The fire alarm testing is done by those. They come in, they tag, they send us reports. They're done through we use Simplex, which is a licensed outfit that takes care of those kinds of things. Tilly comes in and does our inspections on our sprinklers. They're licensed. They tag and license each and every device that they inspect. You know, they also give us recommendations that we follow through with as well. But the life safety important aspects are done by qualified outside individuals. They're not self-policed. Our inspections for dorms, you know, pulling a fire alarm to making sure that they are evacuated in a proper amount of time are done internally, and those kinds of things, because you don't bring an outside firm in for that. But when it came to the sprinklers and the installation and the voluntary installation of sprinklers, Eastern has spent nearly $2 million as a whole to put a sprinkler in every dorm room. And I know the neighboring institutions are doing exactly the same thing on a voluntary basis. I know that was it was going to be a state mandate where they were coming down and saying you have to install them by an X amount of date. And I know there was some interest in Harrisburg over just what they were speaking of, why are you doing just these kinds of institutions versus these kinds of institutions? So mostly the universities took it on their own to do them voluntarily. So we do qualified inspections. We do qualified installations. We are very concerned about life safety. We file the reports that are required under the Clearly Act as well as the others do. So thank you.
Well, we're not going to test your sprinkler system. We're going to ask for certification. We're not going to ask for certification of all these. But how about the light switch and the plug-in? Who checks those to make sure that there's safety?
When we have, just like an apartment dwelling or anything else, when we have dorm turnover and such, we go in, we send our electricians and our plumbers in to check all of the plumbing fixtures and make sure that they're not dripping and stuff. We make sure that there's outlet covers on the rooms, the lights function properly. We inspect things like that because sometimes kids bang their beds into receptacles and those kinds of things. All those things are important because they're safety issues and they're also functional issues. If you move into a place and you're unable to work your light switch or your outlet's not functioning properly, or if it's missing a cover or something like that, which makes it unsafe, that's just totally unacceptable. And we have a certain product that we like to put forth. Our students and our parents that come in, that move the students in, anybody here who has moved their students into dorms, they do their own little inspections when they come in. They look at the light switches and the covers and stuff like that. And if something's out of place, you must admit that you would say, hey, you got to fix this. This is my son or daughter that's in here. We want to make sure that they're taken care of. We do that on our own because it makes perfect safety sense to do that, and it's also makes business sense. I mean, we have a product that we're putting forth too, and we want to put forth the safest and the most advantageous to the students for their learning education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Colleen Price from 352 Shimoni Road. And I agree with Commissioner Schaefer. I don't see any exemption, why there would be any exemption for a dorm. It's essentially an apartment building. In fact, it's probably the biggest group of apartment buildings we have in the entire township. The students who live here are almost a third of our population. There's been no one who's inspected them. They certainly shouldn't be able to police themselves. And I know, in particular, Valley Forge Military Academy built their dorms, I think, back in the 50s. Valley Forge has had basically a fire sale this summer. They were listing property for $25 million. They sold it for $10 million, which indicates to me they don't have a lot of money. I've been on their property and I've looked at their dorms and I've seen old shoddy air conditioners. I would just look at wiring issues, and I don't think anyone has inspected Valley Forge Military Academy in particular, and that's one that I would be very alarmed about. And I do know that a neighbor told me that she had been in some of the buildings at Valley Forge and there was standing water in the basement. I mean, that's a rumor. I don't know if it's still there, but I mean, I do worry about Valley Forge in particular. And I went to Providence College many, many years ago, and there was a horrible fire, and 13 girls died. And there was no inspection by the township. So I don't know why, if all the colleges are here telling us that they have the greatest systems, they check it 4 or 5 times a year, have any objection to having the township come in and inspect, because it could only save lives. And believe me, if something like that happened in this township, it would be devastating to the township as well as the colleges. Also, I have a rental unit in New Jersey. I pay $200 a year for a rental license, and if there's any disruption, I lose my license. So I don't know why, again, that they would have any issue with that, because they certainly are in the community. I think their dorms can be within 250 feet of our houses. That is our community. And on the Section 8 housing, public housing, if you want to inspect it, fine, but I know that Section 8 housing, because back in the day, too, I had a Section 8 house. They do very, very vigorous inspections on an annual basis by licensed inspectors. So I really think there shouldn't be any objection, and if they really are up to snuff, that they shouldn't have any issue with it. Thank you.
Any further public comment?
So anybody interested in tabling this and letting the representatives from the university work with the staff to attempt to identify a ordinance that is more agreeable?
I'd be willing to do that with a fixed time limit.
Okay, so I'll motion that we table this for 30 days and allow
There's a motion on the table.
Yeah, one can amend a motion at any time.
But to table the original motion?
Yes,
You can move the table
one can
anytime.
make a motion to table at any time. So I motion that we table this for 30 days, and give staff and representatives of the universities an attempt to work together and resolve differences in the resolution.
We have a motion and a second for
Okay.
discussion by the board.
Yeah, Don, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but, it's funny, there are 3,000 rentals in this township that are non-institutional. I don't remember ever letting them write the code. I don't ever remember inviting them in, asking them what they thought we should do in terms of our job. So here we're going to invite in an outside organization to tell us what we should be doing. And
I
it's
don't
just
think that's-
factually
I don't
incorrect,
think that's
John.
an accurate
It's factually
characterization.
incorrect. We're not going to have them come in and tell us what we should be doing. We're going to come in and we're going to ask them to work together on this ordinance, similar to the point that Bob made earlier today. Well, maybe then this is a good time to bring the rental people in and have them, give them the same opportunity also. But I mean, I don't think you're speaking to the facts of the motion. It might be a terrible idea, then tell me why.
Well,
but-
Don, what you've admitted is that you want to invite them in because you want to hear their opinion of whatever ordinance should state.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Well, I'd be curious to hear what staff thinks about the proposal to table this for a period of 30, 45 days, whatever, to have discussions with the institutions on this ordinance, or whether it's not a good idea. Do you think it's a good idea or not?
I don't think it's a good idea to table it. I think, there's been a lot of work. I think there's been a lot of history here with the inspections and lack of inspections, which are obvious. This is a move in the right direction here. I also find it interesting that any time that we look to try to cover our costs, there's a problem, and we have to look at that. But yet, when we can give away our services, no one has an objection. So we have the balances, which is interesting, is that we're looking to try to cover our expenses and improve the quality of life here in the community. Yet we are going to take time to further look at this here. I think it was interesting tonight to have the universities speak so much against it. Raises flags of why you would be against it. which is raised a concern.
Well, they didn't say they were against it. They said they would be for it.
I
If we
think
could sit, no, he said they would be for inspections. I sat here and listened. They said they'd be for inspections. If you review this ordinance and not make it a dormitory ordinance, it's not the same as student rental housing or regular housing where landlords rent property. It is different. And that, and we can justify the fee. The problem is that we came up with this, and I thought we were meeting with the universities, to get input, get their thinking, and we have it, and I think we should.
Well,
Well, it
Commissioner, I
sounds-
just want to just say that's you're entitled to your opinion there, but when I see such vigorous, attack of this, my opinion of that is, there's an issue. Because really, if it's that simple to go ahead and, they want to be on board, they don't have any objections with that, then why is there such a huge issue with this? I think that's the concern, and that's just my point. So.
My sense is that much of the objection has to do with the fees, the size of the fee, and the fact that it's applied across the board. And that is not even in this ordinance. That is in our fee schedule that we'll be talking about later, and is something that's easily amended, 5 months, 6 months down the road if it turns out it's not commensurate with what we're spending. So I don't see passing this ordinance as the end of the discussion, really. The discussion, I think, that is raising such ire is the fee. And that, I think, can be a continued discussion.
But the fee is based on licensing them to have a dormitory room, just like licensing everybody else to have, and we can withdraw that and all that. And it's a little different when you're dealing with 2,000 dorms, when you're dealing with individual landlords.
But we do offer a sliding discount based on volume.
No, not anymore.
Well, I'm
It's gone.
sorry. In the past, we did. And if the concern is the fee, we can discuss that when we're adopting the fee schedule tonight, item L.
No, the $100 fee might be justified.
It might be justified.
You
And
can justify, you
the
put
other
all the
way I
thing
look
is-
at it is, there's nothing wrong with setting the fee, and then maybe as staff get a handle on this process and how much overhead there really is in doing 2,000 dorm rooms. That's a lot of administrative.
Fees aren't even an ordinance, are
I
they?
could ask Bill
What-
White or John
what-
Rice.
What is the problem with spending 30 days to sit down with the universities and have a full hearing and the staff and come up with something that everybody can agree upon? What's the problem with that?
Let me ask the question to John Rice and Bill White and other members of staff who want to chime in. Could we enact the ordinance tonight, pass the fee schedule tonight, and 30 or 45 or 60 days out, change the fees if we find them not to be appropriate?
Yes.
So we're not locked into these fees for
mean,
the
I-
entire year.
But we also have the ordinance to deal with.
Well, there's some, I mean, I recognize, we met with Villanova, the staff, last week, and all the operational issues that Mr. Cornelia raised tonight, in terms of having licenses revoked and things like that, we discussed. I view them as, and that's what we would change, Bill, I mean, in the ordinance, but administratively, there's work that we've got to do, and I think the community development's got to do to implement this, so it's not a burden on the universities, because it is different. But I just think it's better if you go forward with this ordinance at this time. It can be amended at any time, and the fees can be amended at any time. The fee ordinance, which is before you tonight to be introduced and to be adopted in January, has a provision in it that says it can be modified by separate resolution at any time. So we're not going to have to go through an ordinance adoption in 2011 if you want to modify the fees, because that's built into what's been drafted for your introduction tonight. The ordinance has been on the books since 1991, and it is geared primarily towards off-campus student housing, and there's some things that, and we talked about this with Villanova last week, that administratively we can agree to implement this in a way that meets their needs. I just think sitting down for 30 or 40 days, we're going to hear the same thing you heard tonight and what we heard last week, is that why do you want to do this? You shouldn't do this. It costs too much. And we're going to come back to you, and you're going to have to go through the whole ordinance enactment process again.
So John, just to be clear, you've sat down with them and had this discussion and
Last week,
Okay,
yes.
fair. I
We
just
had
wanted-
four.
right, okay.
Yeah, we had 4 representatives, and pretty much what was said tonight was said then, and we had a discussion, and there's some confusing language in this ordinance. I don't think anyone's ever, Mr. Cornelia gave you the world is skies falling scenario as to how this might hurt Villanova or the other universities. No one's had licenses revoked along those lines for noise. I mean, there's a way that this has to be implemented that I think community development, the staff can implement it, so it's not going to be a burden on the, I mean, the fees is a
how
separate
do you,
issue.
just going forward, because, 15 years from now, I suspect most of us who are sitting here tonight won't be sitting here in this conversation. How do you document or guide Matt and his department?
Administratively.
So would you put a memo together?
Yes.
Would you? Okay.
Yes. And then if that warrants, because remember, we're also looking at some other changes to the student housing regulations in terms of your zoning ordinance. I didn't want to do a total rewrite of this ordinance at this time just because of what we were doing. So, but administratively, we can come to some agreement on how this gets implemented with the universities without sitting down for 30 days and trying to come up with the perfect ordinance. I just don't think that's going to happen. And if this is going to be implemented next year, I think Matt's got to start looking at this in March. He has to have something put together, and we can have those administrative, some kind of something in writing, Kevin, with the universities that this is how this is going to happen, and here's how we'll proceed.
I'd like something somewhere that's appropriately done that somebody can pull out of a file 10 years from now and say, this is what, while this says this, the clarification document that you guys shared with us is
Right.
says this is how it's going to be done.
I mean, it would be like an administrative regulation that, I mean, there's other policies and procedures that are not in ordinances that I prepared over the last year or so on how to do certain things. It would be like that. We would meet with the universities, get their input to make sure that it wasn't a burden on them. I mean, that's my recommendation.
Mr. Tremaine, just address briefly.
Briefly?
Yes.
Okay, I'm holding you to that.
Okay. One, what I'm a little concerned about is we talk about implementation, but we have no guidelines, and it appears like we're rushing through this. I'm not really certain why this has to be done now if we have no guidelines on how it's going to be implemented. Certainly, if the township had guidelines on implementation, and they're talking about not even sending out the applications until June or July, why are we doing it now?
There's no
And
point in preparing guidelines unless you have an ordinance in place. It always works that way,
Yeah,
Nick.
Hank, the problem we have, though, as soon as we adopt this ordinance, then we have to react within 30 days, as you know. And that's, we don't want to do that. And I don't think the township wants that.
I'm not going to ask staff
But
to put together a set of guidelines, which, that's taking the cart before the horse, I'm sorry.
You have, okay. Yeah, I think you know my position. You have an ordinance now.
do.
We've expressed concerns over it.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to table. All in favor of tabling, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Opposed? Motion fails. So we go back to our original motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
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 5-2. Thank you, everyone. 5-2.
John Rice convinced me. I seconded Don's motion, but John's argument convinced me to vote against the motion I seconded.
Thank you for your time.
And I didn't even put Chief Kelly on the spot and ask him to come up and talk about it. No. That's it for community development, finance and audit.
Right, the first item on the agenda is the schedule of bills payable. However, there's been an amendment to it that was left at the back of the back of the room that results in a change.
Yes, sir.
So the original item that was, I guess, posted on the website identified as 2010-12B with a total of $3,620,034.14 now is being changed to $3,641,24.72, excuse me, as a result of a deposit received from Verizon, of which a portion has to be passed through to Studio 21. So
That is
that's the
correct.
sole change to what was at the back of the document. The only question I have, Bill, is why is it going through the Capital Improvement Fund?
Well, that's where it has been accounted for going back to when the PEG grant was first received by the township. I don't disagree that there's probably a better place to account for it at, but at this point with the 2010 budget, just continuing to account for it in the same place.
Okay.
Where the funds are deposited in the capital improvement fund, and then the 80% for Radnor Studio 21 pursuant to the agreement is immediately sent back out to them. So,
Okay. But we don't know that they use it for quote-unquote capital.
no, we don't.
Okay. But the logic here is it's been budgeted there and just to keep things along.
Yes, sir.
And I assume 2011 it'll be changed?
I think that'll be part of a bigger discussion with those
Fair enough.
revenues.
Okay, so I make the motion to approve.
Second?
Commissioner comment, discussion? I just also want to note my previous recusal on issues associated with office basics. Is there any public comment? Very well, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. And note that Commissioner Nagel excused himself for that vote.
Let them come. All right.
John,
Next.
you want to vote aye, John?
We already voted, so he can't.
The vote's
he
still
can't vote.
open.
You spent 3.69, he wasn't here for that?
Say aye on the scheduled bills payable.
Once the vote is announced, it's final, so the motion carries 6-0.
He wouldn't have changed the, it wouldn't have. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of ordinance 2010-42 for the final budget for the fiscal year 2011, establishing the township millage rate and the sewage rate fees for 2011. So, Bob or Bill, you want to just give us a quick rundown on where we landed?
All right. Pursuant to the discussion we had on the 29th, the budget was updated to reflect the various motions that were made that night. Additionally, well, to highlight some of those, the reduction in the real estate millage down to the .30 mils increase, which represents approximately a 9% increase over the current township portion. When you add that to the blended total tax rate, which would include schools in the county, that's approximately a 1% increase. So that reflects the reduction in millage there. It also reflects the addition of the part-time wages to community development in anticipation of the increased inspection load for next year as discussed on the 29th. It also includes the discussion that we had relative to the township's contributions to the various outside organizations, including the library, the Wayne Arts Center, Surrey Services, Wayne Senior Services, and the parade funding. And then it also includes the elimination of the other post-employment benefit set aside that was included initially. Some of the administrative or some other amendments were made to finance, fire, public works, rec programs, and those dealt with various either typographical errors or input errors or omissions of some kind. For finance, the impact to the total department expenses was zero. It was just a matter of reallocating to include some wages that were, for the part-time employee that were accidentally left off initially. And that was my mistake with my own department, so I apologize for that. With regard to fire, when the calculations were being done for the contributions, it was accidentally, it was noticed that the township's contributions to Bryn Mawr Fire Company and Broomall were accidentally not included initially, so those have been subsequently added at the same levels as what was contributed for 10. And there's actually a special line item that's been added to that particular section of the general fund to reflect those. As well as in certain circumstances, a zero was left off in inputting some numbers, and those include the street light amount for Public Works. It was initially entered at 1,620, and it should have been 6,200. Zero was accidentally left off of that. Recreation supplies was initially entered at 4,950, and it should have been 49,500. And the same with rec programs under rentals. 1,500 was initially entered, and it should have been 15,000. So during our review and re-review, those errors were caught. And then the last amendment, which is not to the general fund, was the inclusion, and this was discussed on the 29th of November as well, is the inclusion of replacing one of the police vehicles that was
damage, and we got an insurance policy.
well, it's not just damage, it's out of
Total.
commission. It needs to be replaced. Yeah, I lost the word for that, thank you. So the inclusion of replacing that vehicle is in here, net of the insurance proceeds that we received. So where we stand right now is, as the general fund exists right now, there's a $924,000 deficit that still exists in the fund. So we'll still be overspending our revenues by approximately that amount in the general fund. With regard to the fund balance policy, the target level, we would be in compliance with that because the ending estimated cash balance for the general fund is roughly $3.6 million, whereas 12% of revenues is $3.1 million, so we'd be in compliance there. And basically, those are the major differences from November 29th.
Any questions for Bill?
Well, I do have a couple questions, but first, before I ask those questions, I want to address, last meeting, I had put out the notion for our discussion and thought about taking the cuts that we made to our nonprofits that we had put at 10% and reducing it to 5%, given the fact that we might be receiving getting some extra revenue in from insurance payments. Since then, we have been given a very convincing and clear recommendation from staff that we don't do that because we are at almost $1 million deficit, and we are not funding our post-employment benefits, which is not smart. So I am going to withdraw that suggestion. Anybody else is free to take it up. Because I agree, it's true. We are running at $1 million deficit, and we do need to be quite austere this year. However, I still believe that we have kind of grossly overcut our nonprofits, especially the library. A 10% cut to them is almost 10% of their entire budget. It's going to mean very drastic service cuts that our public is going to feel every day. And it's a bigger cut. I've said before we should all be suffering equally. It's a bigger cut than some of our other cuts in feeling, in the way it impacts us. So I would like to continue to address this moving forward, that I would like to try and find ways, if we do have extra revenues come in, after we refund our post-employment benefits that we've talked about doing, that we look at refunding some of what we've cut from the library. I am very uncomfortable with with cutting $82,000 from the library. So, having said all that, I do have a couple questions about I was very confused by the activity summary that we got, the amended activity summary that we got today, because it didn't seem to me that the numbers matched up to the full budget and the bottom lines that I had been looking at on the full budget. And specifically, so the activity summary was page 5 of the new draft, of draft 2, and the summary page of the full budget is page 59. And the transfers out number, for some reason on this activity summary, goes down to 3.7, and I can't figure that out.
Yeah, that was my mistake on Friday. The activity summary on page 5
Yeah.
still had the $317,000 of other post-employment benefit transfers built into it.
Yeah, but
that was
that's
the error I caught this morning and
No,
took
I
out.
got that, but the transfers out on our main budget is 5.7. That's $2 million difference. So there's probably a very easy explanation for it, but I couldn't figure it out. And then, not such a great difference, but the total revenues on that activity summary, 25,683, didn't match the total revenues on our summary. It was closer, but it didn't match. It was on the main budget, the full budget, the revenues ended up being 25.9. So this is the general fund, yeah. So maybe these are just, I don't know what they are, but the number in the end came out the same, the 924 deficit. So there must, it must just be that the numbers were put somewhere that it's not reflected.
The difference in the transfers.
Yeah.
Let me just be sure that I'm going to tell you the right thing before I say it out loud. I believe the $2 million difference in the transfers deals with the township's contribution to pension. That should be reflected there, so that may be something I need to fix as well. And then, I'm sorry, I was looking up the transfers numbers when you were talking about the revenue. So
The
I
other
didn't
number
catch
was the 25.6 for total revenues, which on our main budget is 25.9. Now, maybe that's the OPEB, because that's about a $300,000 difference.
Not the revenues.
But that would be reflected in expense. I mean, are this activity summaries comes right from the main budget, right? Or maybe not?
Well, ideally, right now, they're in about 5 different spreadsheets and Word
Yeah.
documents, so
Okay.
it's not all linked. So when one number changes, I have to remember to go through and change them in the other areas. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure why those don't add up.
Okay.
But I would say, though, that the detail in the general fund, which starts on page 49, that would be
that's more
what the
reliable.
board would be adopting tonight.
Okay, that's what
Because
we're
the
adopting.
summary, the activity summary on page 5 is intended just to be that, a summary.
Okay.
The detail of what is being adopted would be on page 49.
Okay.
And obviously, I'd document where those differences are at and make sure that those were cleared up.
And I guess my more general question is, so we do have in the 2010 estimated budget the $555,000 for a insurance payment and the ethics intake. And so that has brought our starting fund balance up quite significantly, of course. But then And we've made these changes, including a couple $100,000 of new expenses that were detailed just prior to this discussion. But I'm not finding where I had expected our fund balance to have gone up, our ending fund balance to have gone up more, given that our starting fund balance went up by $555. And in fact, our ending fund balance is only going up $41,000 from. So I was confused about how that increase in the beginning of our fund balance kind of got whittled down over in the expenses.
How did you come up with 555,000?
In the revenue section under, let me just make sure I get it right. In the revenue section next, we have refund payments, and it's 555 on 2010. It looked like that went in 2010.
Yeah,
Yes?
it was estimated that that would be resolved this
Right.
year, so it was included.
In
yes,
2010.
Mhm.
So that's in this budget.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
right.
included in what we
Yeah.
predict our ending fund balance to be in 2-3 weeks.
Right. And so it also shows up in the beginning fund balance for 2011.
Which then, yes, it would
Right.
roll itself over
Which
into the
it
beginning
does.
balance of 2011.
It's exactly
Yes.
$550,000 more than it was in our last budget, in draft one. So that's all in there. But then when you get down to the ending fund balance for this year, it's $41,000 more than draft one. So, am I making sense to you at all? So it's not, and I understand that there are some new expenses that have kind of showed up in this budget from clerical errors and from whatnot.
Mhm.
But I added those up, and it was only a couple $100,000. So I just wasn't sure where the rest of that kind of got sifted out.
I'm gonna have to do some math, so.
All Bill's doing the math, it demonstrates the need to improve the system that we have.
Absolutely.
The financial software system where everything is done.
And let me say that given the dearth of, tools we have to work with, I found this budget so easy to understand, so easy to follow, and with great information. The narrative that's gone along with it is so helpful to us. I'm sure it's helpful to the people in the public that are reading it.
And not to forget the condition of our financial data
Right,
Correct.
when Mr. White came in.
right.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Under Section 3, which is the annual sewer service charges, just educate me on how we handle people who have on-site systems, how we tax them, or if they have a well, just let me finish.
Pay anything.
Or if, in the opposite, whereas they have a well, but then they have public sewer. Anybody on staff that thinks they can answer it?
Well, on-site system doesn't pay anything.
Okay, that's easy.
That's correct. The on-site system does not pay the sewer rent. I believe the people who have a well and it's not metered, they get charged a flat 100,000 gallon rate. So that's the number that's used.
Okay, well, that's not reflected in these documents, so how do we get there? All this says is we set the limit at 557 per 1,000 gallons.
So the people, there are people who have a meter on their well, and they report that to
Right.
Amy. So if they do not have, as I said, if they don't have a meter, then we use the figure that we assume that they used 100,000 gallons for the year.
Okay, but where is that documented? Is that in policy, in code,
I
administrative
don't believe it's in a
code?
code, no, it's been the policy.
Probably don't have a whole lot of those left, do we?
No, there are very few left.
Should we put that in the fee schedule,
John,
Dan?
what we can do is talk with John, we can actually document that somehow either in a resolution or an ordinance to actually set that, so this way the board could set that either annually then, based on that.
Okay, thank you.
That particular item.
It won't affect the passage tonight, but I used to be under that circumstance. That's why it caught my eye.
Sure, no, that's a good point.
Some townships go by the number of water closets you have, and that's the way they do it, so. there's
No, that's a
different-
good point to be recorded this way, everybody can follow that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any public comment?
Bill's ready. to
Well,
answer.
Wait, I have comments.
Wait, Bill's ready to answer the
Oh,
question.
Bill's ready?
Can I go back and address
Elaine?
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Schaefer's question? Okay, here we go. First of all, I'll just go by beginning balance, revenues, expenditures, and then the impact of the ending fund balance.
Okay.
And I'm comparing the general fund from the initial proposal to where we're at now.
Okay.
First of all, the beginning balance increased by $555,000
Right.
based on anticipated insurance proceeds in 2010.
Gotcha.
Then the revenues decreased by $738,856, and that was made up through the decrease in the millage as well, and that was offset a little bit by rounding changes to some of the other business taxes. So revenues decreased by $738,856. Then expenditures have decreased by $225,041. So when you increase the beginning balance, decrease the revenues, and then decrease the expenditures, the net change to the ending fund balance is an increase of $41,000 and some change. So revenues went down, well, beginning balance went up, revenues went down, expenditures went down, ending fund balance went up.
Okay.
So in essence.
To the tune of the whole 500, basically.
Well, to the tune of 41,000.
Right.
Yeah, Elaine, the 550 was eaten up by the fact that we went from a 17% tax increase to a 9%.
But we accounted for all that. Like, we kind of did it, and that sheet that staff made us up, that equaled the $900,000 that we were going to be taking off the table. So, anyway, I'm satisfied, we'll,
Well, yeah, to address that real briefly, some of the changes that were included in that separate memo that listed the different options.
Yes.
Some of the decreases that were identified there were offset by having to fix some of these grammatical or
right. But about
typographical number errors.
About $210,000 worth.
Yeah,
were
and then the
offset.
other error was the difference in the the OPEB liability was $317,000. I think that memo had $372,000.
Okay.
So that was another,
Uh-huh.
that was pointed out by Jerry, by the
Right.
resident Jerry at the last meeting, Jerry Linden.
Okay.
All right, just two comments. I noticed, well, first of all, on the OPEB, I'd asked Bill White to put together some type of a one-page document explaining under GASB 45 what our funding requirement would be for OPEB, which is I forget what the acronym stands for. It's all the
Other post-employment.
post-employment benefits.
That's it.
So this is out, and this is in addition to pension?
Yes.
Yes.
This is completely separate.
Yeah, so we look at Bill was nice enough to get this together today and send this over. It looks like I'll just give you some numbers. In 2008, I'm going to try to zoom in on this a little bit here.
John, we're gonna-
2008, the OPEB cost was projected $4,698,000. We funded at $1.4 million. I'll just round off on some of these. Again, $4.6 million. In 2009, we funded at $1.6 million. 2010, $4.7 million. We funded at $1.6 million. So we've grossly underfunded this liability. Thanks for putting that up. One of the points I brought up at the introduction of the budget was that we really need to fund this OPEB, at least at a minimal level, and it looks like in the current budget we've decided not to fund it, even at the minimum level of 300 and was it 17,000 or?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, 317,000. And what we see on the chart as we go through this, on the table, the liability just keeps accruing, and we keep underfunding it. It doesn't take a mathematician or economist to figure out that we're going to hit a wall at some point in the future, and it's going to be pretty steep. I mean, if you just look out a few years, all of a sudden that liability is in the tens of millions of dollars. In 2014, it's about 22 million. And as much as I'd like to pass the buck, I don't think it's right. And I think we need to do something about this. It seems like this budget's kind of a done deal, but at the same time, I'd mentioned that if we found any money next year, that we try to earmark it for this. We had a discussion about what to do with the proceeds of an insurance claim, and originally I thought it would be a good idea to put that in sewer fund, because that's where the money came from. But after looking at this liability, I'm thinking this is where the money needs to go. On the chart up there, you'll see there's a baseline of funding that we've been doing, and you see it falls far short of what the funding requirement would be to meet the obligation. I want to point out, and I'll do this best I can, under GASB 45, which occurred 2 years ago, we were required, like many municipalities, to state this unfunded liability that's on our, that we're facing. It's not on our books, but it is now. And but apparently under GASB 45, there is no minimal funding requirement like we have an MMO for pensions, minimal municipal obligation. We don't have that for GASB 45. Is that right?
That's my understanding, and I believe a lot of the reason why is we currently get some funding from the state of Pennsylvania to help offset some of the MMO, the pension side of this, whereas we are entirely on our own with this liability. So basically, the GASB says you need to calculate this and report it, but they really don't have the authority then to say fund it or else.
Okay. Well, I wish I had an answer for this, because when you look at these numbers, you just say, well, how can we ever pay for this? But what I like to do with this is say, well, how can we afford to pay more? So when it comes into terms of hiring new employees or adding to staff, this chart helps you recognize the true cost of having staff and having the benefits that we give. We saw the rate employees and the police employees give some concessions for 2011. But when you look at these liabilities we're facing, you know, I think I read 3 articles. Some of these were peer reviewed. One was from Wharton, which was not peer reviewed. But in essence, we have states filing bankruptcy or planning to file bankruptcy because of this. I actually have a valid concern, at least in my own opinion, that we could face the same decision 10 years down the road if we don't fund this adequately now. And if we fund it adequately now, then it'll cause us to make better decisions year to year in how many people to hire, what the tax rate should be. It'll cause us to live within our means. But by ignoring this and pretending it doesn't exist, even though we've known about it for 2 strong years now, would be just, in my opinion, for me, is irresponsible. So I don't know if there's no way to fund this except by raising taxes a huge amount, or making tough decisions about found money. And I talked about this at the last budget introduction, that if we find money, and we did find a lot of money thanks to the work of staff, Bill Martin in particular, finding about $1 million or $1 million plus in audits, we really need to start funding this liability. Before we spend another dollar on a park, before we buy another piece of land, before we do anything, we need to fund this. So I just want to talk about it. I'm not trying to convince the board to do anything, because I don't know what we could possibly do right now except pass the budget that we have. But I would like the board to really consider a formal resolution saying that if we find extra money next year that is unexpected, meaning it's not part of our operational money, that we earmark it to this funding. We set it aside because it grows. We're 3.5 million 2008, and already in 2010 that number's up at 9 million. We're already behind the 8 ball there, and we just keep going. And if I run a second term, by the end of my second term, the liability is 22 million. And that's not right. I mean, it's just not right to let it keep growing like that. So,
John, we have a big challenge too, just with such things as infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of things that are waiting out there for us that we really have to start figuring out how we're going to address them.
Well,
and meanwhile, the United States government's going to go broke because their whole pension system's based on pay-as-you-go. So,
well, we don't have the luxury to print money,
and pretty soon they're not.
And we can't. So, what I would suggest is that we try to align. Here's my thought on it. We try to align our operational expenses with our tax base, meaning we collect at this point about $12 million a year in revenues from our tax base. And we try to live on that, and the extra money that comes in from Act 511 should be earmarked to cover these enormous growing liabilities that we face. And I know there's been some effort by staff to try to do this, to try to match tax revenue to operational expense. And I tried to do this with our current budget, and I did a fairly good job of trying to match up, the core services we provide to the core tax revenue we receive, but there's still a gap there. Anyway, I guess that's all I want to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had that discussion with both Bill and Bob, is that we have a structural problem with our budget.
If I could, just being that it's been discussed and now this chart's been looked at tonight, for the benefit of those who don't necessarily entirely understand what we're talking about. Other post-employment benefit obligations is, Mr. Fisher pointed out correctly that only 2 years ago were governments in general required to start reporting this liability on their balance sheets. Prior to that, governments did not. So nationwide, as governments have been implementing this requirement from the GASB to put this on, it has caused the same kind of reaction. Because it is something, pretty much all governments are on a pay-as-you-go basis. So our reaction here is not any different than the states have reacted by putting theirs on for those states who have state-run pension programs, or even the federal government. So it is a real liability. It is something that is actuarially calculated based on a whole list of assumptions. Basically, what it is it's made up of the costs the township incurs associated with retirees of past employees in terms of health care. It's almost entirely health care, although a very small piece of it deals with life insurance coverage too. So, and then the actuarial part of this assumes certain service time assumptions, certain mortality assumptions based on the insurance tables that exist for life insurance. So, and it was a snapshot done as of January 1, 2008, based on the plans that existed at that time, based on the collective bargaining agreements that existed at that time. So I think as we move forward, understanding that this is not just an accounting thing, it's a real obligation, and there's the math and the science behind putting the numbers together. However, I think as we move forward to better understand the different pieces that make up this number, that'll help us start identifying how to address it. There are things the township can do in terms of plan designs and collective bargaining agreements and those types of things that we can start looking at now. That granted, it'll take a while to implement and start to offset some of these. Just like these numbers didn't just pop up 2 years ago. They existed prior to that. They've been building over time. It's just that no one really knew about them. So I think as part of our larger discussion on how we fix these items, understanding the pieces, parts, and how we can address what we can address internally, it would be just as important as figuring out what the long-term solution might be on what type of revenue might be needed to fund it as well. So hopefully that helps for anyone who wasn't entirely sure what this issue is. But it is real, and we can address it from a couple different angles.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I believe in addition to determining how you're going to fund this presently unfunded liability, there's a real serious school of thought that says that the better way of doing this is to manage your obligations through just the items you just mentioned. Collective bargaining agreements, determining whether or not employees should be bearing a greater share of the health premiums, things of that nature. And that would go towards taking that chart and bending it the other way so that you're at least leveling off or maybe even coming down in terms of your unfunded liability.
Mm-hmm.
So I think managing is something which staff, we're going to look to staff to make recommendations to us going forward. How do we deal with existing staff who are going to become retirees? That's going to be the real challenge, I think.
Yeah.
And I agree with John, it's not something we can simply put off to, another board. If we start to manage this better, get a program going in that direction, that unfunded liability is going to be increasing all the time.
Any further board discussion?
I just, one other piece on the budget. I was looking at Public Works, and I noticed, and Bill Hagan's still here, we had reduced, the paving right now is completely funded, the street paving is completely funded through the liquid fuels tax, and the funding that we've received from the state. Bill, can you just talk about the condition of our roads, and are we going to adequately be able to pave the roads that we currently need to pave? And
this is actually a move in the right direction. For the last couple years, we've been spending about $300,000. It's about $100,000 a mile, depending on what kind of corrections the roads need. We were looking at it for $300,000. You're looking at probably a 30-year turnaround. If you pave Lowry's Lane this year, it would be 30 years before we'd be able to get back to that, and pave out the township. It's entirely too long. We should be somewhere 15, 20 years. Obviously, all roads are going to have they're going to differentiate in life just because of the ADT. Obviously, a cul-de-sac street is going to last a lot longer than something that has 5,000 vehicles a day. So I think it's a move in the right direction. I think $500,000, you're going to get, 5 miles of roads done, and you'll get them done right. With the $300,000, we try to get as much as we can out of it. You're doing some piecemeal roads. You're not doing whole roads. And sometimes that's not bad. I mean, if you have a road that's 1.5 miles, if you do 3/4 of a mile 1 year and 2 years later, then the whole road's not falling apart at the same time. But to answer your question, the $500,000 is definitely a move in the right direction.
But I see in the out years that it increases, and I guess my question was, should it be higher for 2011? Should we be putting more than just the liquid fuels funding towards it? Should we be putting taxpayer dollars towards it?
At some point, you're going to need to do that because your liquid fuels money is only you can only utilize that on your roadways. Your other properties that you own, your parking lots, things like that, money to pave that have to come out of the general fund. So sometime in the future, you are going to have to put money in from the general fund in order to pave those, say the Willows driveway, things of that nature.
I just want to make one note about this budget we're passing tonight, and that is the ending fund balance 3.612615 is more than our 12% minimum. It's $441,000 more than what we have required ourselves to set aside. I'm not suggesting we do anything about it, but just to bear in mind as we move forward and we talk about what we want to do, funding our OPEB and whatnot, we could go down to our 12% minimum and be just fine.
Well, if anyone else on the board would like to support the idea of bringing that fund balance down to 12% and putting the 441 into the OPEB fund, I would support that as well. It's still in the general fund in essence, but we're allocating it, to meet this liability, this growing liability.
But we're not dealing with ending balance, we're dealing with beginning balances. The 12% is the beginning balance, not the ending balance. It's the balance that starts next year. We're not dealing with ending balance, we're dealing with beginning balances. That's why you raise taxes, to get your beginning balance up if you need to.
No, hang on. The $441,000 difference is in the ending balance.
Yeah, it would be on the ending,
so-
estimated 2011 ending balance being greater than 12% of the estimated 2011 revenues.
But
for the full year.
But the beginning balance is what?
The beginning balance, based on how we're going to end this year, is estimated to be roughly 4.5 million.
Way above our 12%.
But I guess
But you gotta remember, you're gonna be spending $1 million of that to balance your budget.
Well, we're going to spend $1 million of it because we don't have a balanced
That's right,
budget.
yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the concern is
Yeah.
we're still within our 12 to 15% fund balance target, actually kind of in the middle of it. But we still have the $1 million deficit that basically we're just kind of punting for a few months
Yeah.
until
Yep. Yeah.
until the issue comes back up again, because that still needs to be addressed. We can't do
Okay,
that
I'd like
forever.
to move to public comment if we could. Public comment on the budget.
Eugene Bodo from South Wayne. Regarding the deficit, and I know the guys in the finance area are keenly aware of, you did a refinancing in the first week of November, and I believe Commissioner Schaefer read the Moody's report on what a AA rating was. And after it was released, Moody's for Radnor has, the rating reflects the township's large affluent base, below average revenues, below average reserves, and Moody's believes the township's diverse $5.1 billion tax rate will remain stable. It goes on to say basically that in '09 there was a $3 million deficit, and if it goes further, what could further deteriorate that at the bottom, Moody's could make the rating go down if the general fund balance continues to decline. Now, we issued bonds the same day that Lower Merion was in the market. We paid 25 basis points more than Lower Merion did. 25 basis points per $1 million is $2,500, and on our outstanding balance, it's $130,000 per year. This continues to go, and you can see that we continue to deteriorate. It's just going to get worse. And to Mr. Fisher's point, we're only going to be paying more money in interest as we go forward. The deficit is something that you have to look at, and deal with currently. Second item.
Before you go to the second item, isn't Lower Merion a AAA?
Lower Merion is a AAA.
That's the highest you can get for
That's the highest you can get,
Right.
except Lower Merion is AAA and Tredyffrin's AAA.
I think there's what, 3 or 4 in the southeastern Pennsylvania area?
There are a number, and they're all our neighbors.
Right.
There's no reason we shouldn't be a AAA.
I understand that.
That's our goal.
I'm sorry?
That's our goal.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that with the deficit, we should be focusing on it. And when we go to reissue and refinance the next round, that it's costing us money by not being a AAA. Also on the 8th, Commissioner Fisher passed the provision or the ordinance to fund Bryn Mawr Fire Company, which I looked at as going around the budget process by doing it in front of the process. Commissioner Fisher said that he had 2 sons that were at Bryn Mawr and voted to pass it. I would ask President Nagel if you would revote this as part of the current budget and ask Commissioner Fisher to recuse himself with both of his sons being volunteer firemen at Bryn Mawr. I realize they serve the community. I realize that it's something that we use. We also have.
Well, recognize there were 3 other people who voted for it, including myself.
I understand that, but he has a personal interest.
And Commissioner Fisher's ward is served by the Bryn Mawr Fire Company, hence his vote. It wasn't because his sons, I mean, I'm speaking for you, John.
Yes, but
it wasn't because his sons.
I received no private pecuniary benefit from that vote. Zero. None.
Well, you got a personal interest in it. So from a personal
yeah, because if
standpoint,
my
you
house
should
catches
recuse
fire,
yourself from that
I
vote.
want the fire department to come to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Understand that, but we have a fire department. These guys are here begging.
They
for
do
money.
not serve.
They're here begging for money.
They do
We're
not
underfunded.
serve the entire township.
I understand that, but.
And I don't think anyone sitting in that group would ask that we took money away from Bryn Mawr.
Well, just address the commissioners.
Yeah.
Let me just respond. Your points are well taken. Those numbers are in the budget. We are voting.
No,
When we passed the budget
understand they're in
tonight-
the budget. They weren't a part of the budget process. They were done in front of the budget.
Yeah, and that was the most transparent.
And I'm asking that you recuse yourself because your sons are part of the Bryn Mawr
anymore.
Fire Company.
They still on volunteer, John?
Well, actually, my sons are off at college now.
I understand,
yeah.
you said that, but you have a vested interest in that, is my point. And
I don't think John
actually
has any
don't.
more vested interest
My
than I
sons
do.
have a vested interest in that, but I don't receive any private pecuniary benefit by virtue of them being in the firehouse. In fact, I donate money to the firehouse in addition to
Well,
this.
you're donating our money to the firehouse, is what's ending up happening. That's my point. That we have firemen here that are going underfunded. And I believe that, and raising our taxes while we're contributing to Bryn Mawr that made a mistake, and we're fixing their floor. We're fixing their mistake. We have our own problems here. And to Elaine's point, we're cutting 10%, $82,000 out of our library to fix Bryn Mawr's problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, my name is Martin Heldring, and I'm from Audubon Avenue. First of all, I'd like to applaud Commissioner Fisher's comments this evening. You are spot on with the structural issues this township is facing and the rest of the municipalities and states in this country are facing. If you look at the statistics, Philadelphia's pension fund runs dry in 2014, Boston 2016, Chicago 2019. At that point, Chicago, 50% of their budget is going to be going to pension costs in Chicago. So if there's any doubt in anyone's mind as to why Daley decided not to run for another term, it's right there. Commissioner Schaefer, last time you mentioned to the CBFAC committee members that you have many responsibilities. I agree with you completely. But I would argue that your number one responsibility is fiscal and to prepare a budget in a transparent, responsible way. The budget that's put forward today, I don't think you can argue fulfills that responsibility. First of all, taxes, wonderful. They're down from 17% to 9%. That's a good thing. But if you look back over 10 years, Radnor's taxes are up 43% compared to consumer price index of 30. That's not a good thing. Tredyffrin's up 19. That's not a good thing. If I look at the expense side, if I look at the 3 proposals put forward by the township, there are 34 CBFAC recommendations made that were under review or under progress in the budget that I saw. Not one was in any of those recommendations that I saw. If I missed something, I apologize. But I didn't see one. I know there's a big debate about whether we could sell property. There's a lot of statistics that would argue that we have far more open lands that even any kind of objective criteria would suggest is reasonable. We couldn't agree on selling one. If you let this continue without addressing this issue, we will face what I would think is a tsunami. It's going to happen, and at some point we'll be unable to fund that structural issue. The budget issue isn't hard to figure out. Revenues have collapsed because we were in a real estate bubble. And by definition, bubbles don't come back in the short term. So we're not going to see those revenues return. You look at the expense side, and they continue to grow as if the party is not ending. If you look at 50% of the budget is employee expenses. You can't get around that. Yet I look at salaries alone, in many cases going up by 4% in an environment of zero inflation. I understand there's contracts. Contracts get reopened. I'm sorry. Benefits in Radnor Township are 78% of salary expenses. The norm is 25% in the private sector. You all know that. Now, let me be clear. I'm not here arguing. There's a lot of very high qualified and good employees. I think it's unconscionable in the private sector that companies mismanage themselves and then come along and fire a lot of people, often before Christmas. However, we have to be respectful of the taxpayers, and employees are not owed compensation that is not competitive with what goes on in the private sector. And if you don't address it now, it only gets worse and worse and worse. And so I would argue, although there's been comments that this budget is virtually approved, I would argue to reject it and go back to the table. I would also argue, Commissioner Mahoney, that when I looked at the governance structure of the township, I saw many committees, Shade Tree Committee, Ethics Committee, Board of Health. There was only the CBFAC, which had a one-year charter, no Finance Committee. I think in part that was why you spent 2 weeks ago a lot of time talking about an interest rate swaption. That is a common vehicle in the finance community. It is an excellent vehicle. It's not something you shouldn't use. The reason that the township is underwater is because they made the bet that they wanted to protect themselves against rising interest rates. If interest rates had risen, everyone would be applauding them. Unfortunately, no one predicted interest rates would be where they are. It's a little bit like buying home insurance. It's a terrific investment if your house burns down. It's the worst investment if you don't have a claim. It's the same thing. If you had a finance committee, I think those issues, you would get the benefit of terrific advice from people who really understand. There's also no HR committee, which I think if there had been over the years, maybe some of the issues that you're facing here would have been addressed earlier on. So I would encourage you to take this budget back. There's 34 recommendations from CBFAC. I mean, some of them are, there's 5,000 in the budget to fix the bridal suite at the Willows. I was at the Willows yesterday. It's not going to be competitive with Overbrook or Ronamick or Radnor Hotel for years. So why are we competing with the private sector? I mean, you really need to go back and say, what's the mission here? And then determine how you spend your money. And you need to address the structural issues now, because it's not fair to kick it down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, real quick, there's a couple items that I just want to make sure we touch on real quickly. First of all, with the CBFAC, while granted the report is only a couple months old, all of the recommendations as they were put in the budget are being looked at. Many of them can't be implemented immediately. However, some of the things that have been done is we did do the refunding, and there have been included in the budget that it really hasn't been discussed much, except for the November 22nd meeting, was the additional 3 layoffs in Public Works, the 0% wage increases across the board, increased health care contributions by those employees, as well as actually the non-union employees too. And then with regard to the Willows capital funding, I don't believe that was in 11. I think what that is included in the 5-year capital plan as just documenting the fact that there are needs that exist at the Willows. Certainly for years 2012 and out, it's not the intention or recommendation that we move forward with those. It's basically a plan saying here are the items that have been identified for consideration or review. So,
I think in fairness, there were 38 CBFAC recommendations that were listed on your response. 4 of them were listed as complete, and the other 34 were either 17 under review, 17 under progress. And I would just argue that some of those could have been incorporated into this budget as legitimate savings.
And when we do move forward with some of those, then they will be incorporated.
Chip Layfield, Wayne. Towards the deficit, I appreciate the fact that the board's anticipating $500,000 from the insurance company to make us whole or partially whole from our former manager's misdeeds. However, I've mentioned in the past that I feel that the board really has, at least publicly, done nothing to claw back the money, those bonuses that now have been identified by the State Ethics Board as in truly significant amounts of money from those employees, current and past. And, you know, quite frankly, I'm surprised that none of those employees have stepped up and said, okay, I didn't deserve this, it was illegal, I know that now, here's the money back. And I think a lot of those people are gone, but some are still here. And I think that, I really think they should be terminated. If they're not going to give that money back, that's taken out of our pockets. Thank you.
Baron Gemmer, South Wayne. Quick comments. John Fisher has been talking about the post-employment benefits for a while, and that combined with the operating deficit, I guess it's a little disheartening we didn't deal with that more this year, or more than a little, particularly when we look at the choices we were giving A, B, and C from the last meeting. And I don't know how many people read the summary comments, but between choices A, B, and C, of which we chose option C for the 9%, the comment was options B and C do not, in the township manager's opinion, begin to move toward resolving the current and future financial situation of the township, but will just defer the inevitable and more costly tax increases in the coming year. And that's on top of 21% over the past 2 years if you compound the 11 and the 9. So I would hope that we've had this information, that we actually actively start moving toward it so it's not something more catastrophic in the future. Secondly, I'd like to echo the comments that I think we need to keep CBFAC going in whatever form. I know we're working on the recommendations, but having that committee continue on is going to be very helpful to the township. A couple process comments real quick. I know that the numbers are changing quickly. Elaine was, having trouble reconciling some of those, and I know that the budget that was put online today even said revised 1213. For those of us that looked at it when it came out, I guess Friday, if there's any way that in the future, I'm not talking about now, that when there's changes like that they can be summarized so that the public, so that I don't have to look through 100, 200 some odd page document and try and figure out what changed if I'm going to have comments on things. So just as a process point. And secondly, I do appreciate the comparison to the other townships, which was revised in not from the 29th version, but this version to get on more a per capita actual dollar amount, which I appreciate. I think it still needs to be tweaked a little because you look at the 30+ thousand that we're talking about for our residents. What is it, a third or pretty close to it are students. So on truly the burden of tax-paying residents, it's considerably higher than that, and I think that would probably be a more accurate comparison. I'm not trying to, I appreciate the fact that that's being done in terms of trying to compare us to other municipalities. I think it still needs some tweaking to go for us to make a valid comparison and see how we're doing compared to everybody else. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One. Any abstentions? It's yours, Kevin.
Just want to flip my pages. Next item on the agenda is the introduction of ordinance 2011-43, establishing the 2011 fee schedule. Any kind of quick summary, Bob or Bill, you want to give us and give us a flavor for the increase on the document I received over the weekend in the package? It wasn't 100% clear and easily understood, so.
And John, I'll steal some of your. I think what we're doing this year, which is different than what has been done in previous years, is the fee schedule's being introduced tonight as an ordinance and will be adopted. I'm not sure if it's January 3rd or 10th, whatever date that would be. There have been several recommendations from commissioners and the public for a comparative analysis. That's something we'll put together. So outside of that, I really don't. I don't have a summary of of what's included in there.
Fair enough, but you brought up two key points. One is only an introduction, not passage tonight, and two, that by the time we get to the passage of it, that there will be some kind of comparison available.
Yes, sir.
I see the trash collection fees going from $350 to $420 for rear yard.
Yep.
That was based on the information that we got from soliciting the bids.
I'll move the introduction of the fee schedule.
Second, and I have a question. I went through this pretty carefully and did the comparison. And in general, it's, raising fees to recoup more of our expenses. But there were two new categories in pretty much every department. One was plan review, a charge for plan review, and the other was a charge for code appeals. And I was just wondering if we could get just a little explanation about what those charges are. It seemed like that those two charges were put in for every department, and that I didn't see them in last year's fee schedule, so I think they're new.
Well, the first one for the Code Appeals Board, the way it's always been structured was it just said Code Appeals. So I broke it down for every single one now to be specific, whether it's mechanical, plumbing, electrical. It was specific to each realm. If someone wants to challenge that, there's a process. And there's costs incurred with that. The reason it's $750 is because we have to have a public meeting. There's a stenographer. We have to advertise it. So again, we're not going to make any money on this. It's something that we have to charge because of the costs incurred. Okay, and then I'm sorry. So the second question was with
The plan review fee.
because of the code, especially in community development, we're short-staffed. I think within the past year, I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, we spent about over $30,000 in overtime in plan review. These are these are plans that the code officials review after hours, after their day's been cleared out and their schedule's permitted now. But yet, at the same time, we have to pay them overtime now. So these are trying to, again, it's an attempt to recoup those costs going forward.
So is that a review that the applicant is asking for or has to have?
Well, anytime
Or-
you submit a building permit is submitted to the department, it's issued, or excuse me, before it's issued, we have to review it. So there's an average there. Some of the bigger jobs, the commercial jobs, are much longer in terms of hours spent, and some are shorter. So this is where, again, I worked with Bob on this, and we've tweaked it to kind of come up with an average of about 3 hours of what it will take to, some jobs are smaller, but again, some are much, much larger.
And
Great, thank you.
I have concerns about the Sulpizio gym fees, that somewhere on the order of $40 an hour, which I suspect is very, very low for a building. You could rent a piece of process equipment for $40 an hour. So I don't know that it has to happen now, but I think that's a source of revenue. And then also, these activities are competing with people who have private activities in the township. So that's another reason to ensure that these fees are accurate and are set to market rates.
On page 10, the realty transfer tax note doesn't add up. And also, at the bottom of page 10, public document CD creation charge, we say $5. But on page 7, we charge $15 for a CD of the comp plan. So it didn't seem to jive.
I have similar concerns as Commissioner Curley. I've been raising this question often in connection with Parks and Rec service fees. I get a sense that we charge a fee, but I'm not so sure there's a market-driven purpose behind that number, process behind that number. I seem to remember in the last year or two, we purchased an infield groomer machine. Bill Hagan, you might remember the cost of that machine. I remember it being very high.
You had said $200,000, it's $20,000.
20,000?
Correct.
Okay.
It was actually a little bit lower than 20,000, I believe.
20,000. And, I look at the fees that we're charging, and I really question, can we really maintain these fields, the playing fields, not the natural fields, for the charges that we're charging? And has anyone done an analysis on staff to see if we're break even on just the cost of maintaining, say, a baseball diamond or a soccer field or something to that effect, the active playing fields? Does anybody want to, Tammy?
There's a lot of components that would go into it. I mean, for the ball field mix, the hours spent on there, but in actual, it has not been done. And as long as I've been in charge anyway.
So I have a hard time making a decision about the fee schedule because without the analysis, like we're charging $275 a team. I guess that's for a season for softball. I don't know how many teams we have. Can anybody answer that question?
17.
17? So, we're collecting about maybe $6,000 a year in softball permit fees. I don't know. Boy, it seems like we spend a lot more money than $6,000 a year to maintain a softball fields.
It's also used by Little League in the schools, John.
Okay, well,
I think
again,
we identified earlier that we need to have a much longer discussion about these fees and what's a quality of life issue and what things should be.
yeah, I don't mean to
break-even
pick on,
profit.
just so you know,
No,
I'm not
saying.
picking, there's a point here I'm trying to make is, we have a lot of parks in the township that everyone can enjoy. But unless you're yourself or your kids are playing on a team, you're probably not going to use a baseball diamond. You're probably not going to bother to go to the park and have catch with your son. You're going to do that in your yard. And, I did that comparison a few weeks back showing that we spend probably $1.5 million a year taking care of our parks. And we only collect about $600,000 in fees. So the question is, can we raise fees a nominal amount to help offset these costs so that the taxpayers aren't subsidizing these playing fields? We're competing, I think to Don's point, we're competing with private enterprise as well. We have private schools in the township that have their own playing fields, and they charge tuition for those students, and that tuition helps cover the cost of the playing fields that they have. So I have a lot of questions about this. I don't have enough information to make an educated decision. I just have some fees in front of me. I'm not even quite sure which ones went up or down. I think there was some analysis that was done. I don't know if I saw that.
You said we're going to get that.
We're going to get that after, yeah. So maybe we can get that before we adopt this in January.
Introducing it tonight, John.
Right.
Did we didn't adopt this as an ordinance last year, right?
No, it was
I think it was a resolution.
So why are we doing it differently this year?
The charter actually calls that out, that it should be adopted
Okay.
fees, and that should be adopted by ordinance.
So, and then tonight, what we set tonight, we're stuck with unless we choose to reintroduce it. So
That's right. That's right.
If we, I don't know, if we want to make changes, we either have to make them tonight or then go through a longer.
Don, let me, going back and looking at how things have been done in the past, you adopted your fees up until 2007 by ordinance, as far as I could tell. And the Charter, Chapter 162, sets the fees. It was done, I believe, last year by resolution. Well, actually, last year's budget ordinance permitted you to adopt the fees by resolution. So you did it by resolution. This year, and going back and looking at why it was changed, I couldn't tell from '07 to '09 why things changed. But this is proposed to be done by ordinance tonight. But in this ordinance, the last part of it says that it may be amended or revised by subsequent resolution of the Board of Commissioners. So you're introducing this. I'm going to advertise this for either January 3rd or January 10th. I would suggest January 3rd. Make it effective the first of the year. And then if you decide you want to change something January 10th or you can do it by a separate resolution.
Or June 10th, or November 10th.
Or June 10th,
yeah.
right. So, but the way things had been set up in the past, it was by ordinance, there was no authority to change it by resolution, so just to clean it up, we're trying to do that this year with this. And this would apply to any of the fees that are in here. If you decide during the year, for whatever reason, you want to make a change, you can do it by, since it's authorized by resolution, you can do it.
What would be helpful for me before that we vote on this as to adopt this is that I actually get an analysis showing the activity in each area and the revenues from last year, maybe the 2 years of what we received in each one of these areas. I think I have to agree with Don. When I look at the rental for the full gym of $40 an hour, that seems unbelievably cheap. And I know the roof on Sulpizio Gym needs to be replaced, and I think the cost on that is $25,000 or so, $50,000, I don't know. It's great. I love the fact that we have this, but we have to pay for it. One other comment. I noticed on the trash fee, we increased the trash fee by 20% for rear yard trash collection, yet on the discounted rate, we haven't raised it. So we raised 20% on the single multifamily unit with less than 9 attached units from $350 to $420, 20% increase, but the $200 fee we're charging per unit for 9+ units is still at $200. I don't think that seems very fair. If we're going to charge more, we need to charge more across the board. I think the selling point on that originally was that the combined cost, the combined revenue would be equal.
No. In this specific case, it far
Yeah.
exceeds.
Mr.
It
Chairman?
exceeds.
If I may, maybe I'll ask what the board is to withdraw this. What we'll do then is bring back the detail for you in January, and then set the hearing date from that point moving forward. Maybe we can have a, per se, committee meeting or committee of the whole meeting to discuss these, come up with, establish that, set it by ordinance, and then adopt it then after advertising. But I'd asked John here if the current rates would stay in effect for that time period. I believe they would, so whatever the current rates are would stay in effect until the time the board would then adopt a new fee schedule. If that'd be acceptable, answer a lot of the questions and give it more of a comfort level to the board.
Yeah, that works for me. I mean, yeah. So, and then that would be a time for us to come back with particulars. And then we would give you those particulars, and then they would go into the ordinance that we would advertise.
Or you should do it before that, yeah. The questions you have now, you should get to Bob.
Sooner the better.
Sooner the better.
I just address both Don and John your concerns about, or your questions about Sulpizio. The last Parks and Rec meeting, the Parks and Rec board meeting, Tammy did a really nice presentation, a detailed presentation of the economics of that building. A nice PowerPoint, so it's on the website. I would encourage you to look at it.
Maybe that would, I don't think that was in our packet, but maybe that's what we need in our packet, just a copy of that would be great. I wasn't aware of that. You know, it's important to realize that the Parks and Rec Board is an advisory board to the commissioners, and but the commissioners decide, you know, have to make the tough decision of how much to raise taxes, and the Parks and Rec Board isn't really, their focus is not on that. Their focus is on, you know, how to provide the best services for our Parks and Rec program and how to help with that program. So, you know, I appreciate what they do, but we have to make a financial decision, and without really weighing the cost of all these facilities and understanding how we're going to pay for it. Personally, I think, you know, Sulpizio Gym was probably a big mistake. I was against it. I wasn't a commissioner at the time, but I was against the expense because it didn't seem like we were going to be able to fund it. And it's looking more and more like that, so I appreciate that. On the trash fee, you know, I think, you know, we have to have some equity here. On the 9+ units, we're looking at $1,800 in revenue.
36. There's 2 9 units.
Oh,
side
yeah,
by
I'm
side.
sorry, 3,600. But versus $350 a unit, you know, it seems like, I don't know if it's breaking, I don't have my calculator out, but, You know, if the same value proposition is there, I understand it, but it seems unfair at this point.
Yeah, it's still bringing in more than, because it's not based, you don't apply the 350 to each unit, you apply it to the number of trips the guy has to make to pick them up. That's how we develop that, John.
Yeah, but if you're increasing it everywhere else.
Yeah,
it seems
I'm not arguing that point, and I already asked Bob to tell me what happened with that. All right, so on recommendation of our manager, I'd like to withdraw this. Everybody? Yeah, let's do it that way.
All right, so I motion that we table this to allow the manager to address the concerns that we expressed tonight.
Second.
Table, okay. Any further comments?
Mr. Chairman? My
Yes, sir.
suggestion would be just to withdraw this, because if you're tabling it, you're tabling this document.
Oh, you're right.
Which
you're
then
right.
you're going back into all kinds of amendments. It'd be better off just to bring a clean ordinance back to the
Well,
board.
good. We'll just take it off the agenda then.
Move withdrawal.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on. Kevin, you got a long night tonight.
Yep. The next item on the agenda, excuse me, Resolution 2010-70, the 2011 to 2015 Capital Improvement Plan. Want to give a quick summary, Bill?
Sure. The summary I'll just discuss as part of questions that were raised during the review on the 22nd and 29th, in addition to some questions about how certain items that were included in the capital plan specific to 2011 were being funded. On page 11 of the executive summary, there's a capital funding source reconciliation summary that breaks out the different categories of our capital plan, those being water and quality, fire, traffic control, buildings and grounds, road and bridge, equipment and vehicles, parks and rec, and special assessments. So what that does is it shows by what source of revenue that the township receives that each of those categories are being funded through. What it says is that basically the only items in 2011 that we're proposing that we spend are items that are under the $425,000 in transfers that occurred this year and next year, which is the $387,000. That includes a replacement truck in Public Works, the police cruiser that was discussed earlier, as well as software upgrades to community development and software licensing upgrades on all the township computers. The next category, which is the debt category, basically that represents most of the fund balance that's in that fund, is proceeds from priorly issued debts. As you can see there, the $585,000 being used for water quality management, that only represents the total for stormwater related projects. The $650,000 for fire services includes the $600,000 that was approved for expenditure this year. It did not occur this year, so we're making sure it's included in next year. So that's just a carry forward of what was approved for this year. The $50,000 then is for what the commissioners approved for the Bryn Mawr Fire Company floor. Then $65,000 and $25,000 respectively for traffic control and buildings and grounds as detailed in the 5-year capital plan. Under the library debt, that represents the balance of the debt that was issued by the township in 2004 that was returned this summer to move forward with the rest of those projects. Under the sewer rent, that represents the $490,000 that was discussed for various projects relating to sanitary sewer. The liquid fuels portion we discussed earlier tonight. That's the state shared money that we get that'll go back into road improvements. Grant funding, the $100,000 there is for facility improvements. Cowan Park. And then lastly, the cost-sharing projects is under traffic control, and it deals with the signal improvements. As noted on the 5-year capital plan, that project's we're anticipating being reimbursed or having a cost-sharing with, I believe it's Keystone and the Radnor School District. So that breaks out all the different capital items that are included just for 2011 and what the sources of revenues are to pay for those. So again, that's in the executive summary. For years 2012, 13, 14, and 15, basically what the administration was looking to do there was just identify the capital needs that exist. Many of the items that are in 2012 were items that administratively were moved back. They were originally in 11, but as part of a larger review of how we fund capital moving forward, those were postponed where we could. So again, 12 through 15, it's the intention of the plan to just identify those as we start to discuss how we're going to fund them, so that they're at least on paper and we're aware of what's out there.
On some of these, I'm sure we plan to go for grants and whatnot, and I'm thinking like the West Wayne Preserve. Part of that whole discussion as we've developed that plan was that we would look for the maximum amount of grant money. So does that show up here and then would show up in budget projections for income, or?
If we were to be awarded a grant, at that time it would show up as a revenue to offset the amount that's in there for the expense. So, yeah.
Right. And that's the way the 100,000 for Cowan, for example.
Yes. Yeah. And for this year, we had the tub grinder, and
Right.
Which is obviously a much larger one. But when the grant's awarded, then you recognize the revenue in the budget. And,
Willow's Cottage.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, the Willows is another one.
Okay, thanks.
Bill, I appreciate getting it looks like we got a lot of vehicles out of 2011, out of the capital budget. We're down to about 204,000 in vehicles, short life assets. But, we deferred them. We've got 1.3 million in short life asset vehicles in 2012. And, our fund balance policy only allocates, I think it's 225,000 this year. Is it 2011, 250,000, 2012, something like that?
I think it goes up to 250 and
250.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we bridge this gap? We want to buy 1.3 million in vehicles, but we only have 250,000 in cash to do it, and we don't want to use 30-year money to do that. So what do we do here?
Well, I'm not sure we're going to figure it out tonight, but there are a lot of different options out there. I guess that's the $1.1 million question, in how we fund that. I certainly would agree with what the CBFAC included in their report. It's no longer funding those with long-term bonds, but that doesn't mean that funding is out of the option. We can do short-term leases, fleet leases, something like police cars, something that's easily predictable, that's going to turn over in a couple years. Look at those types of options. Granted, you'd pay more because you're paying interest, but that may be some option, some combination of various options that are out there. I know we have, a lot of smart folks living in the community. Maybe we ask them. I know there's some investment bankers out there that I usually get a couple phone calls a week asking what our capital lease program looks like. So we could start looking at all those different types of options. But what that number does show, though, is that there's a lot of capital out there that's in need of replacement.
Okay. Sorry.
Maybe if I can just add to Bill's comments, I think that's one of the recommendations we've made, is the board has to establish a capital equipment replacement policy and then stick to that policy of how we're going to fund those short-term assets and the long-term assets clearly. So that's one of the items for conversation, that the board will need to set that policy in this coming year.
Thank you.
So I lost track. Did we get a motion to approve?
No.
Could I
I'll
have
move
a
the approval.
motion? Okay, we need a second. Okay, moved and second. Any further discussion by the board? Public discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One abstention.
5, 1, and 1. One more for you, Kevin.
All right. Then the next item on the agenda is the introduction of ordinance 2010-44 to enter into an agreement with the Municipal Utility Alliance, and you'll have to explain this one because I had a difficult time understanding what.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. The Pennsylvania League of City Municipalities has formed what would basically be known as a purchasing cooperative. As you know, the PICO rate caps are coming off January 1. And in order for us to participate with this group, basically it's municipalities across the state.
Your microphone is on and it's coming through while he's.
We didn't discuss.
Basically, municipalities across the state are, going in together with one consultant to go out and purchase electric power from a third-party provider rather than just locking ourselves into PICO. In order for us to do that, we have to enter into this, introduce this ordinance tonight to enter into what's better, termed as the MUA, the Municipal Utility Alliance, which will give us the authority to use the broker that the Pennsylvania League of Municipalities has contract with, which is Constellation Energy.
So I understand it, because what confused me, Bill, is it looked like there was an existing agreement, but if I understand what you're suggesting is this, and I'm paraphrasing, this existing agreement was more general in nature. Now they've identified a specific entity.
Correct.
Okay.
The Pennsylvania League of City Municipalities did RFPs and searched, and Constellation Energy is now that consultant. And John Rice put the ordinance together to allow us to enter into them with the consortium for at least for a year. I think the recommendation for the manager is to do this for 1 year. You can lock in rates for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but as you do it, the price goes up from the electric companies, because the longer you go out, the more variable the rate could be for them. So we're doing it for what we're recommending when we come back to you for 1 year with this organization. Then we can look at it again, decide if we want to stay with them or go out on our own. It's kind of the Wild West of
And I assume
electric rates.
it wasn't entirely clear, is we don't actually pay this organization directly out of pocket ourselves. Either the state is paying them or they're getting some kind of commission from the organization.
No, we would, the MUA has contracted with Constellation Energy to review all the members' accounts and get them the best rate through their organization. So basically, we'll be going for this year with Constellation Energy. We're basically buying as a bulk group. We're getting
Right,
a
but do
lower
we
rate.
actually, other than paying for the electricity, do we pay anything else?
No.
Constellation Energy, that's what you're saying, Constellation?
Yes.
Is the name of the company? And that's the provider?
Yes.
Okay.
Bill, is the
Baltimore.
idea behind this that a bunch of municipalities get together through this group, this broker, we get buying power, therefore
Correct.
we get better rates?
You get a better rate by buying in with, I think we're up to 41 municipalities in the group. And the more as they join, you get better rates as a group because you're buying as a bulk rate.
Makes some sense. Thank you.
Move the introduction of the ordinance.
I just have one last question, and my recollection is vague here, and maybe it's gone by the wayside. A few years ago, we made a commitment to like wind energy for a portion of our electricity. Is that still in existence in conjunction with this, or has that gone away? Or
Well, that's up to the management decision, but we're quoting rates without that portion being included.
Move the introduction.
I thought that we had done away with wind power as part of our electrical package.
We did when we went through a couple of years ago. Then we brought it back. So now we're looking to not have it again.
Well, that was when Commissioner Schaefer's predecessor was named the Green Commissioner, because he was supportive of that.
I moved an ordinance.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any further board discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, finally. Library.
I would like to announce that the library has gotten official notification that they are recipients of the Keystone Grant for $12,500 for ADA accessible doors. There's a match, the 12.5, then that will come out of the bond money that we retrieved for the library. So, good news for the library.
Parks and Rec. The winter and spring brochure is now available. It's online, and are we going to, we don't go through the schools anymore with this, right?
No.
Okay.
But they will be distributed around the community.
We'll have them at the library and such. Also, this past weekend was Holiday at the Willows. I think it was a pretty big success, and Tammy's husband was Santa.
Yes.
That's above and beyond the call. Holiday week basketball camps. It's going to be both a basketball and a futsal camp, and it's December 27th to December 31st at Sulpizio. Contact Parks and Rec for more information or to sign up. New business. We have our reorg meeting on January 3rd. We'll do that, and then we'll roll into a regular meeting right after that. So we'll actually have 2 meetings on the 3rd.
I know as of right now, it was proposed the 10th. The 3rd would be the organization meeting, the 10th, and the 24th would be the 2 regular meetings.
Is that the way we want to do it? There's a state law that requires when we have our reorg meeting, I thought.
The charter actually spells out.
Yeah, but the state law
first Monday.
supersedes that.
Well, why?
I had some new business too.
Why? I mean, if we're going to be here the 3rd, why not, the
Why not
reorg
just
meeting,
have a
it takes
meeting?
half hour, why don't we just have a meeting and not have it on the 10th?
Getting used to meeting more than twice a month, so we're priming the year off right and starting with 3 meetings a month.
I play
How's that?
basketball Monday night.
I also would like to see us do the fire, the emergency service discussion, the earlier the better. So I wouldn't mind putting that on the 3rd. Because I know both companies are under a time issue of finding out whether they're going to have this contract.
Well, then we need to have some discussion. John, you said you have some new business?
Yeah, I wanted to ask John Rice on the Bayshore matter. We had the board at the last meeting. I had asked it to be on the agenda, but it's not on the agenda. But I want to ask what our options are in terms of the board taking some kind of an action with the district attorney's office. I think there's something like a private criminal complaint or something of that effect that we could do as a Board of Commissioners. Could you describe that to us?
Well, John, he told you tonight he's going to call the DA.
No, I understand that. That's,
Well, let's do
that's
that
a separate
first.
issue.
Let's do that first.
I just want to understand what our options are.
I mean, the township's options, first of all, are to cooperate with the district attorney, and I'm going to try to find out what the status is, if any, of what they're doing in terms of the Ethics Commission, the violation that the Ethics Commission identified, and whether they intend to pursue it. I think that's the first thing the board needs to know. After that, there is a procedure in the state where anyone can file a private criminal complaint, which would put the issue of whether to prosecute or not back to the district attorney. District attorney reviews that, makes a decision whether or not it has any merit, and it could go forward at that point. But I think that's would be a little bit premature until we get some kind of response as to status of what they intend to do, if anything. I have not had any contact for quite some time with the DA, but I intend to follow up, given what's happened over the last couple of weeks, and see where they're going with this.
Okay, I appreciate that, and please keep us informed.
I just also want to announce that the Sustainability Series meeting about using our zoning to protect open space that was canceled because of our budget meeting on the 29th has been rescheduled. We have a date. It's Monday, January 31st, so I encourage all of my colleagues to mark your calendar. And again, it's going to be a panel discussion with some people from NLT who do land planning along this line, a developer who has used ordinances like this to develop an open space, a very successful open space development, and the township manager from, I believe it's White Marsh, who has these ordinances on the book and has used them before. So it's Monday, January 31st in this room, and I really hope that we get a good showing from folks in our township who are interested in preserving our open space without spending a lot of money.
Any further new business? Public participation for those people who were dedicated enough to stay.
Baron Gemmer, South Wayne, 3 times in one meeting. I won't make that a habit. A couple quick comments. I know you withdrew the fee schedule, but I figured I'd get a couple comments out real quick while they're still redoing it. John, thank you for finding the realty transfer tax that didn't add up. I was going to make that comment. Also, the rear yard, I'm not going into the merits, but going from a 43% discount to a 52% discount. Perhaps some issues of fairness there. One I did want to comment on, which was obviously the bigger item of the day, which was the rental licensing fee of $100. And my wife and I have rental units, and if $100 is, as Commissioner Spengler said, if it's $100 what it has to be, that's what it has to be. No problem with that. What I heard earlier in some of the, not tonight, but in earlier meetings, was what the outside firm might cost, which I believe is like $70 to $90, somewhere in that ballpark. But I know right now it's on a 3-year or 2-year. It's not on an annual. So $100, if that puts us on an annual inspection basis, so be it. That might be more cost in line with the costs. If it's not annual, that probably is higher. And if we change it now, based upon that, that's great. If we change it later to make it revenue neutral, that's fine. We need to keep. I definitely need to keep an eye on that. One of the things I'd like to suggest there, though, one of the variables is not just the inspection, but when there's problems and a report is filed and there has to be re-inspections, that perhaps we could have a fee for re-inspections so that folks that don't have problems or that have minimal problems, are paying their fair share. And that might be a way to help accommodate that particular fee. Just to clarify, the reorg meeting on the 3rd, regardless of whether there's actual business or a regular business meeting after that, 7:30 start, is that what it says on here? Is that what we're going with?
Charter.
That's correct, it's in the charter.
Okay, glad we're following that, thank you. With that, I'd like to wish all of you and all the staff happy holidays.
Thank you, Baron. Mr. Layfield.
Yeah, back to the County Health Inspector Committee. To the extent that our health board has identified problems, material problems, distribution of vaccine and other things, I think I don't really agree with the assumption that if we had that committee, it would take care of those problems. But I don't think you're going to get the committee to start with. So to the extent that problems have been identified, it may be worthwhile for the health committee and possibly other committees and staff to see if there's ways that we can minimize the negative impact of the distribution of vaccines, maybe make connections to the state health offices, or what other problems they identify, because I truly don't think by passing an ordinance recommending to the county commissioners that they create that committee, it will do anything to address those problems if they're real. And if they are real, I think we should probably step up and take a good look at them. Also, I don't really agree with the assumption that having a centralized control for emergencies is necessarily good. I think for Radnor, I think we clearly, this community needs to have that, but I'm not sure every, I don't know how much service we would get from this county commission if it did exist. But I guess my real focus is on Radnor, and if there are real problems, then we should take a look at that and see how they could be mitigated. Thanks.
Thank you, Chip. Any further comments? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All in
Chairman?
favor?
If I may, just a question. I think there was a question. Is there going to be then, are we going to combine the board meeting for the 10th with the 3rd? So the 3rd will be the reorg, and then the Board of Commissioners meeting will follow on the 3rd then too?
I'd
And
like to
eliminate
do
the
that.
10th?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my
So
preference and Bill's, and
Do we have to set that by motion tonight?
then no meeting on.
Does that, to be fair to you guys, does that give you
You're
the
going to have a
time you
meeting on the
need?
10th, right?
So there won't be a meeting on the 10th, so there'll just be, the organizational meeting will be first on the 3rd, and then the regular board meeting will take place after. Is
And
that
no meeting on the 10th.
correct? If that's what the board would like.
Yeah. Will you guys be, because I know that some, with the holidays, people plan to take time off and it may not be consistent, so will you guys be ready for the 3rd?
I mean, really, we'll probably just have the conversations with on the fire companies.
Okay.
If Narberth can be there on that night, we'll contact them, but we'll be,
Yeah, you should move to establish that as a reorg meeting set by the charter. Just move to establish the 10th. And I guess the further question on that is, I guess we'll introduce the fee ordinance that night, which would then be advertised for the 24th.
what we'll
Well, we're
probably do
amending
is,
the
we'll
meeting
probably,
date. We're amending the meeting schedule we approved because it says here on the 10th.
right,
it's
so
a
we
meeting.
would
So we're
correct that.
amending it so that we're going to have a meeting on the 3rd and the meeting on the 10th.
And it
will
will
be
be
eliminated.
we would just change that, correct? We would just change it to, everything would be on the 3rd, and then the 24th, and just to add to John's, what we'll do is we'll have the fee schedule available for the 24th meeting
Right.
of January.
Okay, well, I'll move the change to the 2011 schedule to eliminate the meeting on the January 10th.
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now we move, we adjourn?